Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Wednesday, November 18th, 2020. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, infectious disease expert and epidemiologist with Access Health Louisiana, the largest Medicaid providing clinic system in Louisiana. Dr. MarkAlain Dery will join us to discuss COVID at the holidays.
Festive.
Yes. Then we will talk to the co-president of the National Nurses United Union, Gene Ross. They are still not getting the proper equipment that nurses need, and they are obviously pressed across the country. Meanwhile, Pfizer's latest vaccine trials show a 95% efficacy. The vaccine still continues to be safe as tested. The FDA has now authorized its first home COVID test, or I should say the first COVID home test. Meanwhile, 12 million Americans face an unemployment cliff just after Christmas. Republicans seek to stop Maricopa certification. They're going to do a pretend recount in Wisconsin, and they relent on denying the validity the people of Detroit's votes. Judy Shelton's nomination to the Fed blessedly stalls. Nancy Pelosi, a little bit less blessedly, wins the nomination for Speaker of the House. Chuck Grassley, the latest COVID downplayer to catch COVID.
Oldest Republican.
Oldest Republican, second oldest in the Senate. Rudy Giuliani's coup within a coup is netting him a cool $20,000 a day, or at least that's what he's billing. You never know if he's going to get paid. Alaska adopts the top four primaries and ranked choice voting. Trump fires the Department of Homeland Security expert who said the election wasn't fraudulent. And lastly, the FBI investigating the Texas Attorney General for corruption. All this and more on today's program. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us. Emma's here. We are in studio. Hello, Emma.
Hello, Sam.
Hope all is going well today as we are facing another round of well, I guess just another day of increased COVID numbers.
Over 170,000 cases yesterday, per what I heard this morning.
Axios has a piece, Emma, that says that people just aren't as interested in COVID anymore. As we are watching, there's two charts they have. One goes like peaks up here and then sort of drops slowly all the way down to November. And the other one goes almost the exact opposite.
Mm-hmm.
The one that goes the opposite is actually the increase in the number of COVID infections. The one that goes down over time is the one that people are interested in about reading and hearing on their podcasts and their news. So we're doing a little counter programming today.
So since you're sick of COVID talk, come to COVID talk here on
Exactly.
the Majority Report.
Well, that is
necessary.
It's necessary, and that's basically the way that we do things. We try and have an exclusive audience, and we're constantly.
You guys don't want to be told what you want to hear. You want to be told the reality.
Exactly. We weed them out. That's what we do here. In the meantime, talking about wanting to hear something that they didn't. This story out of Wayne County, which of course is the county in which Detroit sits in Michigan. Donald Trump lost the election in Michigan, essentially in Detroit, because of the numbers there of people who voted against him.
So naturally, that's where all the fraud is.
Just coincidentally. And there were two Trumpistas, Republicans. Let's just call them Republicans. There's no point. That's redundant. If they're Republicans, they're for Trump. If they're for Trump, they're for Republicans. I mean, to the extent that we can make any type of legitimate generalizations about people. I mean, that's just basically the way it is.
Congrats. You did a better job of marketing why Democrats should be winning than the Democrats did.
Yes. Well, there you go. Exactly. And so two members on the Wayne County Board of Elections came up with some incredibly specious reasons to say that they're not going to certify the vote coming out of Detroit. And we'll get into this later in the second part of the program as to just how this fell apart. And there was an incredibly dramatic moment on a Zoom call, if you will. Well, no, on a Zoom call. And that essentially forced two members of this Board of Elections to face the music. And it's another example. I mean, we'll talk more about this in the second half, about where social media actually has like real implications. We've heard where, when you've seen protests and people have video cameras and they say, the whole world is watching when they watch some shameful act by the police, brutalizing some protesters. Well, we live in a world now where the whole world is actually watching, even some of the most sort of banal moments and some of the more or finding very dramatic moments in what would otherwise just be lost to history. 20 years ago, we would not have heard about the conference call or the meeting if there was a situation where two members of the board of Wayne County Board of Elections decided not to certify Detroit. We would just, we would hear that, but we wouldn't hear what had gone on. And we wouldn't be able to impact it. Just our hearing it has impacted it. But before that dramatic moment happened, the Republicans thought like, wow, we may actually have one tiny success, as sort of specious as it was, in pretending that there was something wrong with this election, that Donald Trump didn't really lose, that there was fraud. And here is Sean Hannity and Kayleigh McEnany. And do we have clarification on this? Every time Kayleigh McEnany goes on Fox, she goes on in some different capacity. Like they'll say she's coming on as the presidential spokesperson, which she is, or she's coming on as the campaign spokesperson, so she can't answer any questions about.
She wears a mustache.
Yeah, exactly.
She wears Groucho glasses.
Or she's just coming on as a future commentator on Fox. We're not sure, but she's on Sean Hannity's show, and they're celebrating this very short-lived lack of certification of the Wayne County ballots.
Mass mail-out voting, live ammunition across the nation is what it was equivalent to, and it backfired. And Sean, I've just got to get to you with Michigan, which you mentioned there as you came to me. I held up these papers, these affidavits, 234 pages of sworn affidavits under penalty of perjury. These
by
are
the way,
from
Kayleigh,
one county.
What did CNN say about when you held them up on this program? Didn't they accuse you of holding up blank sheets?
That's right. They did about a 10-minute monologue saying these were blank. They're not blank. In fact, these pages of paper from one county were the reason that you had a county.
I don't look. This is the closest I ever get to working in an office. Mm-hmm. But if you've got 234 papers, do you not bind them
Yeah.
Do you not staple them?
Loose.
You don't
papers.
have hole punches? Like, it seems to me like maybe they're not really using those papers for anything other than just a prop.
Well,
I don't know.
They're overcompensating. I mean, to prove you have evidence, you don't need to bring stacks of papers of evidence. This isn't like a detective show that you watch on the CW at age 13. Like, you can
60 pages right here. As you
Right.
can see, there's writing on there. All of this is documented that what she's holding in her hand is actually a farce.
Right.
It's right here.
No, I mean, they're all about, like, look at these papers. It's
Well-
tangible evidence that we're correct. I mean, it could just be jibber jabber on there. It could be the lyrics to American Pie. Nobody knows.
Do you remember when Donald Trump tried to argue to the American public that he was going to divest from all his businesses, and they just had a bunch of loose leaf binders up there,
Yes.
and there was, again, blank paper. But continue.
These pages of paper from one county were the reason that you had a county level Wayne County canvasser say we cannot certify this election because of these witnesses. They're real people. And one reporter tweeted out, this is the first time in my 20-year history I've ever seen something like this, a county commission refuse to certify. It's because for the first time, you have a president for fighting for the forgotten men and women in Detroit and Philadelphia and Democrat cities across the nation.
Nobody in this country can have confidence in this. Now,
There you go. Well, it turned out that they did have confidence, probably within 12 hours, I think, of that moment. They reversed themselves and essentially negotiated a deal where it's like, you pretend like you're auditing stuff so that we don't look too embarrassed.
Which they're kind of doing a version of in Wisconsin as well.
Exactly.
It's amazing to me because at this point, what they're doing is purely posturing for Trump's next venture and all of them maybe being a part of it. If Trump launches some sort of competitor to Fox News or to OANN or whatever he does, like, this is about drumming up excitement and anger in his base that he can carry over to wherever he goes next, because they know they're posturing. They know.
I think part of it also is Georgia, or at least that they initially thought this would help in Georgia. I'm not sure that that's the case. And it's going to be very difficult because you can only maintain this fake pursuit for so long. Every day we hear stories of lawyers dropping out of the case. I think they're on lawyer like number 12. And of course the buck, and I do mean the buck, literally stops with Rudy Giuliani. He apparently has been trying to edge everybody out and charge $20,000 a day. I'm going to try that too, actually. We're going to maybe we're going to see if we can get this audience down to just a couple of people. $20,000 a day. You got to pay me, though. That's what's going to have to happen.
It makes it a lot easier to pander.
Folks, if you're like most people, you don't go to the doctor or you don't go enough. Maybe you go when you're sick or hurt, but that's it. Thankfully, there's a practical and affordable way to take control of your health and get personalized care from the comfort of your home. SteadyMD is your personal doctor online. It's telehealth and it's done right. What you do is you start by taking a quiz. You get matched with a licensed primary care physician who understands your health needs. Then you have a 1-hour appointment with your doctor. After that, your doctor is available to you anytime by text, phone, video chat, unlimited access for only $99 a month with no additional visits, fees, or copays. Each SteadyMD doctor has a limited number of patients, so they have time to listen to you and give personal care that you deserve. SteadyMD can help you stay healthy, manage chronic conditions, deal with things like, weight loss or sleeping better, lose anxiety issues. I went on there. I took the quiz. They ask you all sorts of questions like, what do you relate to, when you see these images? The only thing was, for me, it was basically dad, because they didn't have then just constantly talking about politics.
They didn't have
but they did.
shows.
Exactly. But they did have a whole range of things. And then they ask you, sort of your health goals. For me, it was sleep better, less stress. And then just general, I want to be healthy. And they matched me. They asked me like what sports I play, and they matched me with doctors who share some of those traits. They were parents or snowboarders. Every year I always get like a snowboard accident. That always helps with my health. But they have experts at like weight maintenance or stress reduction, et cetera, et cetera. and then they gave me three choices of doctors, and the quiz worked pretty well as far as I could tell. SteadyMD is now accepting members of all ages in all 50 states. You go to steadymd.com/majority, take the free quiz, see which doctor is a perfect fit for you. steadymd.com/majority. There's no risk, no long-term commitment to get started. That's steadymd.com/majority. Okay, now I want to welcome to the program, and for the second time, Dr. MarkAlain Dery. He is an infectious disease physician and epidemiologist with Access Health Louisiana, where he is the medical director of the infectious diseases and chief innovation officer. Access Health Louisiana, of course, the largest Medicaid providing clinic system in Louisiana. MarkAlain, welcome back to the show.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
So I'm here with Emma Vigeland, and the last time we spoke was it was probably in April, and so a lot of things have transpired since that time. So I want to just start with that, and we should tell people that you had a tremendous amount of experience in Ebola, dealing with Ebola and other, epidemics, pandemics. From where we were, like I've been trying to rack my brain, from where we were in April, where I think our sense was like, people have dropped the ball here. The CDC is sort of like, behind it a little bit. But what has developed since then is this sense that the response has been driven not just by incompetence, but by almost like an ideology. Have you ever come across that? I mean, is that a common response to a pandemic where it's not just incompetence, but it's like, ideologically speaking, you shouldn't take precautions?
Right. I often say the plan of action has been inaction. And that's the only way that you can do it. I mean, the idea of having 50 states account for themselves to address the pandemic. And there's more than 2,500 public health departments or health departments. So you have 50 states, 50 governors doing 50 different things. You have some that have mask mandates, some that don't, some that are in various forms of opening or closing all over the country. You have 2,500 different public health departments or health departments that are all doing things completely different. Something like this is completely unheard of. And the analogy that I use is as you said, I was working for the World Health Organization during the Ebola epidemic. And I was very fortunate. I was in Freetown, which is in Sierra Leone, Freetown, which is the capital of Sierra Leone, where I was doing my investigations and looking for cases. And so I was in very high level meetings pretty regularly, government meetings, where they were very much addressing the issue on a regular basis. And the first thing they were addressing was misinformation. That was the first thing they had to fight. Then the second thing we had to fight was then addressing all the issues that has to come with an epidemic like Ebola. To see the complete inert activity, to see the fact that there is an inaction, and I think at sometime in like mid-June to late June, I had kind of like probably a mini nervous breakdown, and I'm very open about that because it occurred to me, oh my God, they're not doing anything. The conversation you and I had was very much like, wow, something doesn't seem right. There should be Johnny on. We then later learned that the president knew about this in late January. And to be perfectly honest with you, I think it is somewhat criminal that we are allowing this huge morbidity, and we don't even know what the long-term effects of coronavirus are. Maybe we'll talk about that later. But then the mortality that we're seeing here is, I think, the number 3 mortality behind something like the Civil War and World War II. And it's just kind of happening without any sort of right now. I don't even know where the outrage is. They're not allowing a transition to occur, and more people are dying. And you have somebody like Dr. Fauci. You even actually had Biden say President-elect Biden say that as we continue to not have access to transition, more and more people are going to die. And it just seems like there just doesn't seem to be any sort of effect as a result of that. And as I was saying, I had a complete epiphany, which resulted in anxiety and somewhat of a nervous breakdown when it occurred to me that we're not doing anything about it. And right now we have the highest rates of cases in the world. We have the highest rates of mortality in the world. And right now, North Dakota has the highest mortality rate. If North Dakota were considered a country, it has the highest mortality rate than any other part of the world. And that's largely due to the fact that there's been inaction.
When we spoke back in April, you had told me that the history of pandemics is such that the second peak comes approximately 6 months after the first one and tends to be worse. And sadly, it appears that you were correct. We have improved, I think we have improved the mortality rate as a function of therapies, and I think of realizing who is at most risk and being quite clear in that. But the bottom line is we are now, I'm looking at these numbers, and just in the past 14 days, we are up 40% in terms of the number of deaths. And we are up 50% in the number of hospitalized. We are up 79% in the number of cases. And cases is a leading indicator for those other two issues. So there's every reason to believe 14 days from now, we may be up closer to 50 or 60% on deaths and even higher on hospitalizations, if I understand how this works now. So let me ask you this from April. What has surprised you about coronavirus itself, if anything has? Like, what have we learned? I mean, at that time, we were just learning that, I think, if I remember correctly, you were saying, look, you got to keep washing hands, et cetera, but it was just on the cusp of understanding that these things get aerosolized, and that the communication via air is even more, prevalent than had been assumed at first.
Absolutely. In fact, I went back and listened. And so a couple things. One is I was criticized for speculating that it may be aerosolized. We now know it's aerosolized. So, and then I don't know if you remember, I was saying, I think we're probably less than a week away from having some mask mandates come down the line. And then that actually happened not too far afterwards. So I'm going to answer your question in two sides. I'll talk about the public health side, and then I'll talk about the virus side, the effects of the virus. The public health side, what has surprised me the most is that this virus is obviously, it's a respiratory virus. The idea of touch and whatever, I'm an infectious diseases doctor. Of course, I want everybody to wash their hands regularly, right? So I like that everybody's been washing their hands. And the idea of not being able to shake hands anymore is great. I love the elbow bump, love the fist bump. Okay, great. So, but it's overwhelmingly a respiratory virus. There's no question about it. What has surprised me the most, though, was, and what we didn't know at the time, and most people say that it was an error, and I don't think so at all. When we talk about the masking, at first there was this mixed messaging of masking. There was no mixed messaging of masking. Yes, there was to a certain degree not the idea of not using masks that doctors and nurses needed in the hospitals. So you could use any sort of cloth mask, to do that. It was the idea that asymptomatic transmission, we had no idea that 40% of asymptomatic transmission occurred. And once it became clear to us that there was such a high level of asymptomatic transmission, that's when we started hitting the mask big time, right? So at first we thought it was just like SARS, the SARS-CoV-1 virus, the SARS epidemic, or a lot of other viruses, that you are most infectious when you are feeling symptomatic. And so we knew that if you were sick with the coronavirus, you would stay home, you wouldn't be transmitting virus. The big shocking thing to me was the fact that it can be asymptomatically transmitted, hence the importance of masks and mask mandates. There's no question about that. And now finally, the CDC has finally gotten around to recognizing, and this is something that we've known a long time as well, that masks not only, so my mask protects you, but then my mask also protects me as well. And I wish that had been the messaging from the get-go, because I think that we probably have more of a buy-in for masking
Even if it's not an N95 mask, it cuts down transmission, even if it's just simply like a T-shirt mask or something like that.
Any sort of cloth mask, anything, mask like this, for example, which is what I wear when I'm outside, and then I wear like a KN95 or a surgical mask when I'm indoors with other people. The second thing that has surprised me the most, and this is the thing that's probably the most important, is that we don't know what the long-term effects of this virus are. We recognize that the virus, over a period of time, even if it's asymptomatic, can have pulmonary scarring in your lungs. It can have inflammation of the heart, causing a condition called cardiomyopathy, which is inflammation of the heart, which can cause scarring of the heart as well. And then just recently, of course, we have all the central nervous system issues, the brain fog people talk about, the anxiety, the depression that comes after infection. But then also recently we've noticed that that it may also be a cause for infertility in men, and there has been evidence that has shown that there has been virus has been found in testicles and has been a cause of infertility, at least for one person in this one paper that had been published. So we don't know what these long-term effects are. And when I speculate outward 2 or 3 years, as we start to be able to look in the rearview mirror and see all of the long-term effects, I think there's going to be a national reckoning. I think there's going to be a lot of anger and there's going to be a lot of frustration when people realize, especially as, when we do the epidemiological studies to show, had we done this then, we could have eliminated all of this mortality or all this morbidity. And when people realize that may be a thing, I think that there's going to be a lot of frustration as to how we handled the coronavirus epidemic.
Is there a connection to viral load and having some of
100%.
These intense effects? So the bigger the viral load, some of the consequences you're talking about are more likely?
Absolutely. We see it with HIV. For example, people who inject drugs get a much higher viral load of HIV versus when transmitted through sex. And those folks that get that much higher viral load, like let's say that are intravenous drug users, they die much quicker of AIDS. They progress to AIDS much faster and they die. We see it with Ebola. That was without question. And then now we're seeing it here that very likely that those with higher viral loads have more severe symptoms and also have more likely to die as well. Hence, the wearing of the mask is so important because let's say you are exposed to the coronavirus, just even the wearing of the mask may significantly reduce that viral load. And a great, one of my colleagues from UCSF, Monica Gandhi, wrote a really fascinating paper about this in the New England Journal, where she likened it to variolation or inoculation, which is what we used to do way back in the days when we used to vaccinate for smallpox. We would take a little bit of smallpox from one person, give it to somebody else. So it's called inoculation. And you just give a little bit, and then it protects against smallpox. What we're seeing here is that, and she speculates, and it's a really fascinating theory, that just wearing of the mask may just give somebody just a little bit of virus, and that may account for why we're seeing so many asymptomatic cases.
So, and this actually is a question that I have in regards to the vaccines. Moderna announced, I guess it was, it feels like it was years ago, but I think it was yesterday, that it was 95% effective in their, at this stage in their tests. One of the things that was both sort of like helpful and disturbing about it was that they needed to get to 154, I think it was, infections out of the 30,000 people. And they had projected that not to happen until like February. But because the American infection rate is now like literally graphing, looking like a rocket, that they will get there within the next 5 or 6 days. And so they will have a sense of, between their placebo and their vaccination groups, just how effective it is, where these 150 infections lie in one or two of those groups. Pfizer announced today that as their test went on, they found it also at 95%, which is 5% higher, which means that the subsequent infections happened to people who got the placebo. Here's my question, and I think, it's hard to sort of speculate how quickly they'll be able to roll that out. That's more of a production issue on some level. And And then, there's it's easier to get the Moderna, I think, vaccine to people because it doesn't require the same type of freezing that the Pfizer one does. But here's my question about both those vaccines. And this also leads to that question about asymptomatic. If you are asymptomatic, you can obviously pass it on, right? Is that the same with the vaccine? Like, can you be protected from getting it with the vaccination, but still get it enough to sort of hand it off?
Sam, that's an excellent question. That was actually one of the points I was going to bring up when we got to vaccines today, is that is a huge unknown right now. So remember, both the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines were really announcements by press release. So we have not had a chance to actually read the papers or the journal articles rather. And until we do, those are one of many questions that we have to ask. I would imagine, now this is completely speculative, but I would imagine if they had that information, that would have come out with the efficacy rates that they released as well. So, but we don't know. I think that it's too hard to say right now, but under ideal situations, yes, the vaccine hopefully will be able to prevent transmission of virus to other people. And if it does do that, we will get to a post-coronavirus era sooner than later, if that's the case.
And 95% efficacy, even if it doesn't do that, let's say, is still really incredible, because part of having a vaccine, the presumption is that only a certain percentage of people are going to take it, and you will get to a certain level of adoption, if you will, that then basically gives the virus very little room to move. It can't move in as many different directions as it normally would. And so it gets inhibited and it just sort of like fizzles out. But with 95% of efficacy, I mean, that's assuming people thought 60, 70% is really would be like, because our flu vaccines aren't even that high and they are relatively effective. But at 95% of efficacy, at that point, I almost, as an individual, let's say, I'm not as concerned with how many people take it. Then it's it's less of a herd issue, and it's more of it's less of a me issue. It's more of a you issue if you don't take it.
Right. I mean, so you bring up a very good point. So one, I just want to be very clear. Yes, they're talking about 94.5% or 95%. And let me just explain what that number means. Essentially what that means is that if you, the person who gets the vaccine, are exposed to coronavirus after you are vaccinated, and there's time to allow your immune system to build immunity to it, that if exposed to coronavirus, there's a 95% likelihood that you're not going to get the virus. So that's what that number essentially means. And the reason why it's so effective is that, let me just kind of take you guys back to college biology for a quick second. And those vaccines are what are referred to as
some bad news for you.
Yeah, I did not take college biology.
I hit the. But please.
I was hopeful. That's right. You were probably pre-law. All right. So mRNA is part of the genetic code. These are mRNA viruses. We've never have had mRNA vaccines before. They were developing them for coronavirus. Moderna was actually in the process, or not the Moderna that we know of now. One of the entities of it was actually working on this mRNA vaccine for the common cold coronavirus. And what the mRNA does is it's a piece of genetic code that gets inserted into us. It gets into cells. And what the cells do is they start pumping out the mRNA code is coding the spike protein of the coronavirus. We've all seen the coronavirus. It has all the spikes on it, right? So that spike protein is ubiquitous amongst all of the coronaviruses. So this may actually help us, and I haven't heard anybody say this, complete speculation, but that this may actually help against the common cold coronaviruses. That's one of those things that we need to see as we go on. But the reason why it's so effective is that the body's pumping out just the spike protein. It has the virus isn't there at all. It's not a live attenuated virus, nothing. It's just the protein. And the immune system, antibodies are generated and latch to that spike protein. And once you start building up that immunity, if then exposed again to the real virus, your body's already been primed to actually take care of it. And so that's why there's been this high rates. And that's why, because they're using the same technology, it's amazing that you have two different companies that are having the same levels of efficacy as well. It's really remarkable. And I agree, hopefully this is something that could actually, quote unquote, and I've said this a million times, but this hopefully could be a game changer.
And maybe in the future we'll come back. Is this story, I know I've done a little reading about this mRNA, and it was sort of like the laughing stock for a while, I guess, in this industry, this area where people are like, this is mad scientist stuff and quackery on some level. And so all these things were sitting on the shelf and were pulled off because it sounds like people were just like, whatever you got, try it at this point.
Absolutely. And of course, the Moderna vaccine came from National Institutes of Health. So the fact that Dr. Fauci had, and Dr. Fauci's an infectious disease doctor. He's the premier of us all, and so when he really put his interest, when they gave money through Operation Warp Speed to Moderna to do this mRNA vaccine, it did implant kind of like a level of justification for them to continue to do that work. If hopefully these vaccines will prove to be successful, if this is the case, we are going to see a shift now toward a lot more of these mRNA vaccines because we can produce them very, very quickly. You don't have to go through all of the rigmarole to produce the older type of vaccines like influenza that needs to be in egg products and this sort of stuff. It takes a long time because you need a lot of eggs because there's a lot of people, right? So if you could get away through all of those difficulties with respect to development of vaccine and use this mRNA where you inject a little bit of genetic code and then that genetic code kicks out an antigen. The antigen is the part of an organism that antibodies latch onto. And if we can do that with other vaccines, we could be in a much better position when we do get to COVID-22, because as I said the last time, yes, the things that we have that got us to COVID-19, we have not changed with respect to that may prevent COVID-22.
That is when I have quoted you many times, and I should just remind the audience that when I asked you what you were most afraid of what's going on, you said COVID 2022, and I quote that quite a bit in a lot of conversations. All right, so just quickly, based upon what you know about RNA, and of course, like we haven't seen any of the papers, all the caveats that are there. There have not been really much reported side effects, maybe some nausea, maybe a little bit of a headache. But is that consistent with what you know about that type of technology, I guess?
I'm a little out of my world, so this is completely speculative. I've heard interviews with the scientists. I've read a lot about the vaccines, and I'm reading between their lines as a physician, as an epidemiologist, as an infectious disease doctor. I really do believe that this is going to be a safe vaccine. I really, really do. I was initially a little hesitant. I was a little off-put by the speed. And of course, the politicization of the whole thing was just like anybody else, had me somewhat hesitant. Of course, we need to read the papers. Of course, we need to see the safety data. That being said, the interviews that I'm reading with the scientists, and of course, they're putting out their best foot. They're putting out the people who are going to say all the right things or whatever. I understand all that. But when I read between their lines, I believe that this is going to be actually a positive thing. I think that if it's true that this technology of being able to inject mRNA so that cells take it up and they kick out this antigen and that it does not interfere with any other functioning, that this could potentially be, again, not only a game changer for coronavirus 2019, but any future coronaviruses or Ebola, influenza, avian flu, what have you. This could be something that would be a remarkable technology upgrade to vaccines and to preparing us for pandemics in the future.
Okay, so lastly, we are a week from Thanksgiving. today. A lot of people are going to be traveling. I think it's like, depending on what part of the country we're talking about. I mean, I can tell you in New York, at least in South Brooklyn, mask wearing, at least outside, there is a tremendously high compliance. And it even as you're walking down Flatbush, I don't see anybody for, maybe a block. Just the idea that person's wearing a mask and I'm wearing a mask sort of indicates to me that, like, we're signaling to each other, we're taking it seriously. I know I don't need to wear a mask a block away from you. You know you don't need it from me, but it's our way of indicating this is the right thing to do. And if we go into other places and we're being careful, we're taking, I'm sitting right now in a studio with Emma, but she's on the other side of the room. I've got plastic sheeting all across here. We've got air filters over there. I've got humidifiers. I got the window open. It's a little chilly. I got my sweater vest on. If people are going to get together and in reasonable numbers of people, maybe I have one person come into my sort of pod, as it were, what are the precautions that people can take that will mitigate that risk? Obviously, mask wearing. Does my HEPA air filter do anything?
I would think so.
Doing anything? Or the window? What's happening?
Okay, so one, please don't do it. Like, when I got married, my wife was like, Thanksgiving is our family's. You're just going to have to deal with it. And so when my mother-in-law called and said Thanksgiving, we were like, absolutely not. There's no way in the world. We're actually doing something, just the two of us as well. I would recommend that because what we're going to see, and just kind of going backwards for a quick second, when I did say that, yes, we have known traditionally that in pandemics, especially pandemics caused by respiratory viruses, that there's always a winter peak. And what we always, and what I have always thought, and this is something I've told you in the past, I've been studying since I was 14, because epidemics were just fascinating for me, was we always thought it was the cold. People go in for the winter, they go indoors, but it wasn't necessarily something that we saw, in the Southern Hemisphere, but we did see here, and then, of course, cases go up. But what I'm realizing now, it's not just the cold, it's pandemic fatigue. But I never realized it before because I'd never gone through a pandemic, and most epidemiologists obviously had never done it as well. I think that it is the cold that's driving people together and increasing cases and transmission that leads to that second wave, but it's also pandemic fatigue because people then are starting to let their guards down. And I'm telling you, what we're going to see in February pales in comparison to what we're going to see here, or what we're seeing now. I live in New Orleans, right? And the big discussion is Mardi Gras. No, there's no Mardi Gras. Like, that's it. Like, Mardi Gras, the idea of having Mardi Gras is what caused what happened in New Orleans in April was because of Mardi Gras. We're going to see so many cases in February because of Thanksgiving and because of Christmas, and the fact that people are fatigued, they want to be with their families, they want to do these sorts of things. So to answer your question, if it happens, and El País, which is a Spanish newspaper, did a wonderful article. It was more of a graphics, and it's called like a room, a bar, and a classroom. And when you don't look at it on your phone, look at it on your computer. And when you scroll through it, it goes through and showing these beautiful animations of how if you're in a room with no ventilation and nobody wearing masks, and you have one person who's positive, everybody's going to get positive within 4 hours. If you have some masks, you'll have maybe 4 out of the 5 people will have virus. If you open up the window and increase circulation, we know that will significantly decrease that transmission. And we saw that from a study that happened in Germany, where the 2 towns in Germany put students back to school. They were maskless, which is incredible. But what they did is they increased the ventilation system in the schools significantly, such that they drove transmission to almost zero as a result of doing that. And what we've seen is that circulation of air when you're indoors is so incredibly important, probably as important as mask wearing. So if people are going to do it, they should sequester themselves for 14 days. So that means they should have done it starting a couple days ago at the time of this recording. Get tests. We know that the rapid tests for asymptomatic people don't perform well. when compared to a rapid test for symptomatic people. So people should, if you're asymptomatic, you should have a PCR test. But of course, the problems with that is that it takes several days for those results to come back. But if you can do that, 14 days quarantine, a PCR test ideally, and then drive to wherever it is that you're going and then remain masked indoors with ventilation, that's probably the safest way you can do it.
MarkAlain Dery, thank you so much for your time today. I can't tell you how much I appreciate this. And we will check back in with you. And this time we won't wait 6 months. I suspect February is going to be really difficult in this country. And in spring, hopefully, we'll bring some better news. But I think we're in for a real difficulty. And I have to say that, honestly, like I have been planning these months now based upon our last conversation. And so I really appreciate the information. And and I also want to say, folks should visit maskupcoviddown.com, which I know you're involved with, and it's an attempt to get people, to educate people at a time where there's like almost an equal force to diseducate them about mask wearing. So this is a good resource for folks.
Absolutely. We're doing this 28-day challenge based on a op-ed that I wrote that went viral in June that basically said if everybody just masked for 28 days. Why 28 days? The incubation period of the virus is 14 days. 2 incubation periods is traditionally what we consider to be a elimination of a virus during a pandemic like Ebola or whatever. So 28 days of mask wearing. If the whole country just did it for 28 days, indoors, outdoors, what have you, we would see a rapid elimination of virus. So Mask Up COVID Down is the website, and we're doing it with Masks for America, which I'm on the board with as well. We've distributed about 1 million pieces of PPE since the beginning of the pandemic. So thanks for that plug.
MarkAlain Dery, thanks so much today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Emma. Nice to see you.
All right, quick break. When we come back, we're going to be talking to Jean Ross. She's the co-president of the Nurses National Union. We'll be right back. We are back. Pleasure to welcome to the program Jean Ross. She is the co-president of the National Nurses United. Welcome back to the program. Do we have Jean? Jeannie there?
I am.
Oh, there you go. Thanks so much for joining us, Jean. It's also been some months since we have spoken, and wanted to check in with you because we just spoke to an epidemiologist and who suggested that that February is going to be even darker than things are now. But we can look at the numbers, and the graph in this country is going straight up, and the not only infections, hospitalizations are going straight up in terms of a graph, and that has direct impact on caregivers and nurses. And 6 months into this, 7 months into this, I guess my question to you is what it was months ago. Are we doing enough to provide support for these people?
Well, what's been done is clearly not enough to provide support for us and other healthcare workers, especially in the hospitals. We are still short of PPE, believe it or not. There's no coordinated pattern. Coordination is sadly needed. Nurses and other healthcare workers are being forced to work ill, which is not good for our patients, certainly not good for us and our families. We are very, very stressed and sleeping less. Some of us are getting a little depressed, but I will tell you that most nurses have a really good attitude about this. They're doing what they're meant to do. We would not be so stressed from a surge if employers and the government would do what they're supposed to do to protect us and the patients.
How many nurses have died at this point in the course of providing care for folks with COVID?
I believe our last number was 245, and it's gone up. It was a low count then, and it's gone up.
And so what at this point, I mean, because it seems to me the biggest problem that we're about to hit is, there have been therapies that have improved, mortality rates are down, we're protecting the most vulnerable people, but hospitalizations happen, and we are getting dangerously close to, at various parts around the country, and certainly we're already there in some countries where, parts of the country where we're getting past the threshold of ICU beds, not just as measured by beds, but in terms of the people who can care for the people in those. I mean, we can always, you can always set up a tent and put beds in there, but if you don't have trained personnel, it doesn't matter. And we're dangerously close to that point, aren't we?
We are. I live and work out of Minnesota, so we're not doing any better than anyone else, despite the fact that Minnesota has always had a reputation for having excellent health care and making that one of our major focuses. We have employers that don't seem to understand basics, like cohorting COVID patients with COVID patients instead of putting them among the regular population. You have employers, as I mentioned, still not having enough PPE, forcing nurses to reuse it. All of those things go toward kind of ensuring that your nurses and other healthcare workers are being put more at risk than they need to be. And we will end up with the situation you're talking about. We're already short-staffed. We were before the pandemic hit because of the emphasis on the bottom line, as opposed to having enough staff to safely care for patients.
This is a story I think that has been completely undertold, and certainly in the context of New York State, I know that better because I'm in here. But 10 to 20% of our public hospitals were shut down in the lead up, just in the time prior to COVID. People didn't assume it was there. We don't need the extra capacity, apparently. And then, of course, we find out when we do. And this is all a function of essentially the consolidation of the hospital business, if you will, the medical business, and these consolidators and these large companies trying to squeeze every dime they can out of our care, as opposed to making sure that we have a little bit of slack because who knows, maybe there's an epidemic.
That's exactly right. We don't need to have pandemic-sized proportions of facilities, healthcare workers, beds all the time. But you do need to have that give there. And we had asked before Ebola even, what is your plan? Pandemics are coming, folks. What is your plan? We can have a plan, work with us. It was poo-pooed. We were frankly lied to, or you're there. There is a plan. We just can't tell you about it yet. That kind of thing. So nurses and doctors have been begging, insisting on a plan, especially for a surge, especially for a pandemic. I believe the Obama administration had something in plan after H1N2. They had started it. That was dismantled. There's been nothing to take its place. And I think the real crime here is that the shutdown that people complained about was done at a good time, and we just completely wasted all those weeks and months not preparing. That's what that time was to be used for.
All right, we just have a minute or two left. Like, what at this point can folks do to support nurses and frontline caregivers at this point?
Well, make sure that what we're telling you now stays in the forefront. Do all the things we and other experts tell you to do. The physical distancing, the masking, the hand washing. It really does work. Please listen to the restrictions. Beyond that, you can go to our website, nationalnursesunited.org. We have petitions to sign. Get those nurses and other workers there. PPE, get that temporary emergency OSHA standard in place that tells employers you must have at least this minimum of PPE for them. Do that, and I think the public will be helpful.
I think people are probably, hopefully, shocked that 7 months into this, we have not been able to deliver the basic protection for frontline workers that that I think a lot of people just assume was there. But Gene Ross, co-president, National Nurses United, thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate it, and good luck to you guys. And thank you for all the work you're doing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's just about it for us at this point. But I'll tell you, Emma, this notion of the way that we run our healthcare system in this country, both in terms of, I think we spend a lot of time talking about the failure of a mechanism to pay for it. But there's also a massive failure in the delivery of medicine, because there's this theory of basically it's the functional equivalent of just-in-time supply lines. Right? Like, we don't want any excess capacity because that cuts into our profit center. Frankly, it reminds me about Katrina, the response to Katrina back in 2005. They had privatized all the buses. They had privatized all the evacuation stuff. And they had outsourced it to one company that had subcontracted to another, and they didn't get those buses there and have them waiting because they didn't want to waste their profit by doing something they didn't need to do. But
well, I mean, we're seeing that too with just the reaction to the vaccine and the fact that they're in any sane system, we wouldn't be wondering whether the news about the vaccine is just basically a press release to inflate their stock price. But I mean, this does look promising, but the fact that we have to have that conversation is concerning in itself. And also, we might have had some sort of collaborative effort between these massive corporations with all of these resources. But nevertheless.
All right, folks, that's it for us today. We'll see you tomorrow. Unless, of course, you're sticking around for the fun half of the show. And just a reminder, this program, if you missed any part of this program, you can check it out on Peacock, the NBC app. We're on the Choice channel, and we play at 5 p.m. and then again at 10 p.m. every day. And there's more. I just got an IM. Moon in the Lake. And sorry, this guy's wrong. There will be no reckoning, and no Republican will be held accountable for their malicious handling of COVID. I think if I had to agree, if I had to take a guess, I would agree. There's going to be no reckoning. I think within the context of the medical field, there'll probably be a little bit of like scientists will probably look at this and say like, we could have done this, we could have done that. But as a political matter, I think people are going to just try and,
I think it depends if there's a long-term effect, these like we were talking about earlier, there's some people who talk about the sleeping sickness that developed in the 1920s after the Spanish flu that may have been a long-term effect of the Spanish flu. If there's something like that, I think we'll see like a sort of, like the thalidomide reaction or something like that in the medical field. I don't think it's going to be
a majority.
Oh, in the medical field.
Oh, in the medical field.
Yes.
A majority of our politicians were already okay with like nearly 30,000 Americans dying every year without health insurance. So I just don't see them calling into account another healthcare malfeasance. Oh,
without doubt. Thalidomide, yes, that was an issue, but that was, I think that is because there was like a physical manifestation that people could see,
right.
And the implications of it. And B, it was, you could narrowly blame one small, entity for pushing this drug. And then, and there were probably doctors who were like, I thought it was something different. Right. I think, and you can look at like something like Agent Orange, and you can see the implications of it later on our returning vets. And even that, with all the sort of like investment that the country has in the health of vets was, largely ignored. And there's still like, there's multiple iterations of that Agent Orange stuff. I think, you read about the 1918 pandemic and it was wiped from our history. Not totally, but
right.
I realized like my grandmother was alive during that. My grandmother was my son's age during that pandemic. I had, my great uncle who my son is named after, he was alive during that time. Nobody, it never even occurred to me to ask them about it. I never even knew that much about it at all. And I think there is, every book that I've read about the 1918 pandemic, there is, like almost like on page one is like, this is like forgotten history. And there was almost like not even like a willful amnesia about it. And Wilson denied the whole thing too, right? Didn't he? Like isn't that the story? And some suspect that he may have had it. And some suspect that may be actually what ultimately led to World War II, because he went into sign those treaties and gave up his principles to sort of like not be so
kind of an eerie parallel, like a notoriously racist president catches the disease in the middle of this pandemic and doesn't take it seriously.
Well, and it had mental implications, and supposedly when he went off to negotiate the treaty, that he forgot or just like gave up on his like principles to not be too harsh on Germany, and because he was afraid of a backlash. Well, but it's not hard for me to imagine that we're going to be so just sick of it as a society that nobody's going to we're not going to revisit anything about it.
Right.
It's just, and I feel like that with Trump on some level too. Like our society is just going to run and run and run until, Tom Cotton starts like setting up the FEMA camps.
Right.
Then people are going to maybe we should have actually taken like the long-term implications of Trump a little more seriously or whatever it is. But folks, we're going to head into the fun half of the program where things are really going to get fun.
After that, just my spirits are up.
MarkAlain Dery is he's
awesome.
Awesome. And people should go back and listen to that interview. It was actually an interview I originally did for Ring of Fire, and I was like, and it was supposed to be like a 15-minute interview, and we ended up talking about 45 minutes, and so we played it on this program as well, and he was right about everything, and which also scares me about 2022. Yeah. I mean, I had asked him, I said, what scares you the most about this at the end of the, and he's like, well, 2020, COVID 2022. But if he's right about the vaccination, and there is a story about this mRNA, it was like this sort of like,
right. It sounds like some sort of movie plot, if we ever revisit it, maybe they'll make some Spielbergian movie about like this science was not considered.
Yeah. It was just like, people, it wasn't so much that it wasn't like, it wasn't woo medicine, but people just felt like this is you're pursuing a dead end.
Right.
And, I don't know what it means to be maligned in that type of industry. But it was there, and I think there was like, whatever you got on the shelves, pull it out and see if it'll work. And it appears that it might, and it also appears that it might like have implications for
future vaccines. Yeah.
But even like protecting us from colds, because what it sounds like is you have these coronavirus proteins that impact the body in a certain way, regardless of what the specific traits about these coronaviruses are. It has to do with their structure. And from what I understand, and I probably am not understanding it properly, it's almost like the vaccine teaches the body to be impervious to the structure, not necessarily even the content. And so you're addressing a whole class of things that attack the body, because you're just building up certain, for lack of my inability to express it, muscles that fight that off. So it's like, I don't know, it's like training to fight somebody in Krav Maga, but you're also pretty good when they come at you with some Taekwondo moves. Yeah. I don't know. That may have been that. I'll wait for a doctor in the fun half to call in and say that's absolutely wrong. All right, folks. Just a reminder, you can support this program by going to Join the Majority Report and becoming a member. You can also support this program by giving us, likes on iTunes and, I don't know. I guess that's about it. I mean, there's other ways. Tell your friends. Come on. Or subscribe on our YouTube channel.
Yeah.
That's
Tweet
the
it
other
out,
thing I should be doing.
Share it on social media.
Yeah,
all
share it
those
on
things.
social media. Do all that stuff. Also, amquickie.com, 7 minutes of headline news every morning. amquickie.com. Don't forget, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. We have merch. You can go to shop.majorityreportradio.com. We should start modeling some of the merch. Maybe
boy.
carpenter pencils, stuff like that.
Yeah. I'll model the carpenter pencils.
There you go.
I'll put my hand out.
Don't forget, Nomi's show today, youtube.com/The Nomiki Show. I'm not sure who's on, but check it out. Always worth seeing. youtube.com, The Nomiki Show. Also, check out The Antifada, patreon.com/The Antifada. Matt, what did you guys do on TMBS last night?
David talked to Paul O'Connell about labor and sort of Keir Starmer's consolidation of power there, and why, it's good that Corbyn is reinstated, but it's not exactly a major victory. And there's some structural things and major obstacles to go over in the UK. So check that out at the Michael Brooks Show YouTube page.
All right, folks. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
In for it.
All right, folks. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you can imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Almost says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
I am a total cunt.
Can we bring back DJ Danner song, please?
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense.
Hey, folks, reminder.
I do not have Parkinson's.
And the alpha males are
psych. Fuck them.
Almost says what? Almost says what?
Hell of a lot of bank. 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 Hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black.
See Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on, fuck them. Fuck things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy.
I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are back. Africans are black.
Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
We are back.
There I am.
Sam Seder, fun half. Emma's here with us.
How you doing?
I'm doing well. Let's go right to the phones today, Emma. We've got a lot to talk about. There's a lot of people have complained about how much you hate Thanksgiving, and we want to talk about that, but we will get to that in a moment.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you've been found out. So nice work.
Wow.
You didn't really keep it on the DL, but
exposed in all caps.
Let's first go to the phones. Calling from a 210 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? Let's try this again. What's going on with my phone situation here? Hello? There we go. Let's try this again. Calling from a 210 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Good afternoon, Sam. This is John from San Antonio.
John from San Antonio. How are you, John?
I'm good. So one of the brightest moments from the past, the post-election news last week was seeing Cori Bush, Jamal Bowman, and Mondaire Jones doing interviews and putting up social media postings promoting left values. I'm hopeful that someday we'll get other progressive candidates who will win their primaries and win in the general election in 1922 and beyond, or in 1922, yes, 2022.
1922, right.
Yeah, so I definitely encourage all potential candidates to run, even in areas where they have long odds of winning. But this year I was overly optimistic about progressive chances in swing districts. But at the same time, centrist Dems also lost races that they were supposed to be close in or even win. So it looks like the Democrats will have at least 222 seats. So if they would have lost an additional 5 seats, they wouldn't be in control of the House. I followed these swing districts very closely through the years, and I know, Sam, that we have had disagreements about the percentage of voters who vote on ideology, and I basically think it's a little bit higher percentage than you do. And in the 2020 House races, the at least 12 seats that have flipped back to Republicans, most of those seats were held by Republicans since it's 2012 redistricting, and many were held for an even longer period. They lost in 2018, and now many have flipped back to Republicans, while Democrats only flipped 3 seats. And only 1 seat, Iowa's 2nd district, which is the closest race in the country, didn't flip to Democrats in 2018. So Democrats set the record for the most House votes by a political party in 2020 with 75.6 million votes so far, and then all the votes still haven't been counted. They're beating the previous record set in 2008 when they received 65.2 million, so that's an increase of 15%. And the total vote count in the House so far is approximately 150 million, which beats the total of 128.6 million in 2016, or an increase also of 15%. So Democrats are winning the generic ballot by 2.3%, and they're expected to lose between 9 and 12 seats in mostly close races. This pattern where one party wins the generic ballot and loses seats in the House follows a pattern that happened in 2016, 2000, 1998, and 1992, and emphasizes how important.
Has there ever been a time, John, where the Republicans, you said where a party wins the generic ballot, in other words, a party gets more votes over the course of the country, but actually loses seats? Has it ever been the case that party, when we say that party, has been the Republican Party, and the Democrats won more seats, even though the Republicans got more votes? Has that ever happened?
Yeah, 2016.
2016, Republicans won more votes and Democrats got more seats?
Yeah, yes, that's right.
Is that right?
Yes, it is. I think it was by about a 1.5 million. They got about 1.5 million more votes, and then I think the Democrats picked up, 5 or 6 seats, just going off the top of my head.
In the House.
But yeah, that also, that happened also in 92 also.
So, the fact that it happened in 2016, though, does that mean that we're overestimating the implications of gerrymandering, at least in congressional seats?
Yeah, I think I've had disagreements with you on gerrymandering before. I'm not saying that. I agree with you that it's a very very bad thing, and I wish every state had commissions that did put out a fair,
The Supreme Court's going to get rid of those commissions anyways.
Yeah, that's
I'm
true.
not being
that's-
facetious about that. They're
No,
gonna,
I agree. I know you're not. I know you're not. I mean, I agree. Like with Ari Berman and all of his. But at the same time, people have always said. I called into this show in August when the Brennan Center said, the only way that the Democrats can win in 2018 is they win the generic ballot by 10 to 12 points, and they only won by, I think, 8.9, if I remember correctly, and then they picked up 41 seats. And so, yeah, because you said the other day that they were going to pick up 6 seats, and I questioned that a little bit.
that Republicans were going to pick up 6 seats.
Right, because they've already gerrymandered these seats so much.
How many did they pick up?
The new seats. I think you were referring to the fact that the for the 2022 races, because they're going to have the redistricting is going to be done again.
Yeah.
So that's what I was referring to. But I still think gerrymandering is very bad. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say it's not bad, but I just think that these individual races, this also happens a lot. And, if you study, elections from all over the world, you'll see vote totals versus, pickups by various parties. And a lot of times the coordination is not very high because, just like this year, Republicans happen to win a lot of close races in these seats.
Well, John, let me ask you this. What are the implications? What does it do to any of our priors, mine, yours? I know that you know all mine. I don't know all of yours, but I know that you carefully track my priors. What does it do to our priors that there was this kind of increase in turnout, and yet Democrats did not walk away with it?
I don't know. I'm not really sure. I think a lot of it, this is kind of one of the questions that I was going to ask you also, is that if you think that this turnout is going to continue in 2022 and 2024. In other words, is Trump driving this turnout for both Democrats and Republicans, or are we going to go back like if you look at the decade of the 60s was a pretty high turnout era, especially like the 1960 presidential election. But then as you go into the 70s, 80s, and 90s, they were a pretty low turnout era. And a lot of people will say that's because of the rise of neoliberalism. The common man felt like he didn't have a voice, and so they didn't vote as much. Now I think in the 21st century, there's a lot more skin in the game with the Iraq War that happened. A lot of people I think that motivated people to vote, and then financial crisis. Just the rise of Trump.
Right. I think, just to interject really quickly, I think the key is going to be, is this a period of profound and prolonged political engagement beyond Trump, or the more cynical, and I think potentially even more likely scenario, although I'm kind of torn about how it's going to play out, is that once Trump leaves, people are going to go back to sleep. But I just can't see the progressive left doing that for Joe Biden in the way that they did for Obama.
Without a doubt. I think that last statement I feel very confident about, whether that means that we're going to get the number. Because the fact of the matter is that really what we're talking about in terms of the surge is, and John, maybe you have a better sense of this, and I don't think we have the exact data yet, but when we talk about these surge in numbers of voters, it's not coming necessarily from the progressive left.
Right,
it's coming almost like from the sort of the more resistance style people. The question is, do they stay politically activated? I am increasingly becoming convinced that campaigns in and of themselves have less impact on things like turnout and the end of elections than what happens in the interim years between campaigns. And if Biden is successful in making people believe and keeping people attuned to why things don't happen or do happen, then I think we're going to see this type of turnout. But it appears to me that we still have a Democratic Party whose leadership believes their job is to not in any way intrude on the lives of their voters until election day.
Well, I mean, does it have to be Biden? I don't know if that falls on him necessarily. Like, it's an odd time because the actual leadership of the party, I don't think in the public's mind, in terms of who they turn to for discourse on the party, like, I think more people care about what Obama and AOC have to say than what Biden and like Chuck Schumer have to say.
I think, I don't know if I would say Chuck Schumer, but I mean, look, he's going to be the president.
No, I know.
He's going to be the president. And it's just like your average Joe or Jen looks at this and just says like, he's the big Democrat now, but AOC, yes, we like, I don't remember a time where we had a figure like an AOC, in the Democratic Party. I'm not even talking from an ideological standpoint. I'm talking about from like Obama was like that in his first 2 years in the Senate. I think he was, at the 2004 Democratic convention, everybody was buzzing about Obama. Everybody was talking about him. People forget that he basically waltzed into that position. I don't know. Do people remember? John, what's your sense about this question? I'll tell the story. Do you remember how Obama won his election? Do you know he won a Senate election? I mean, I know you were like probably like
I was young. I remember. So it was like Illinois party mechanics intro. Like,
well, never mind his primary. He ran in the general election against a guy whose wife was an actress, and they were having a messy divorce. And it turned out like this guy like forced her into like weird, like, I don't know if I can't remember if it was orgies.
I don't remember anything except for the primary. Like, I don't think well, anyway, keep going.
Orgies and stuff like that. Like he won the primary. And then after he won the primary, like it was, I think the guy's name was Ryan. He had to drop out of the campaign. And then Alan Keyes came in to run against it. It was an absolute joke. I mean, he walked away with the whole thing. And at the 2004 election, people were just like, this guy's going to run for president.
Yeah.
And I think it was after that speech, people walked up to him and said, you can be president. John, what's your feeling? What is your prediction, John? You are a prognosticator, but you use numbers. I mean, is there any, can you go back in history? And people were speculating that 2020 was going to be huge voter turnout on both sides. There were people suggesting this because of 2018. People forget Democrats broke some records in 2018 in terms of turnout and off-year election, but so did Republicans. And it's just they didn't do it as dramatically as the Democrats did. Do you see patterns in turnout over the years, John, that would suggest like what's going to happen in 2022?
I'm not sure because I think Trump was just such a huge factor. I mean, in both sides, and that's why I was wanting to hear y'all's opinion. And I would not
downplay, which I think is here to stay, and maybe it's been here for the first time since like in the past 4 or 5 years, the implications of how politicized social media has become. And I don't know if that's a phenomena that necessarily goes away, because it is a phenomena that could be driven by a very small amount of people. Like, so you don't need everybody on social media to be like, I'm no longer going to be political anymore for things to be political. All you need is a couple of people who are like constantly interjecting politics. Like, and so.
And the algorithm favors it too.
And the algorithm favors it. And so, and I think like this is a relatively new phenomena that, is not going to go away, even if Donald Trump is. And I don't think Donald Trump is going to go away, incidentally.
Oh, no. I mean, he's not going to have the bully pulpit of the presidency, but he's going to have the ears of like 30% of the country.
Yep.
One thing about AOC is, I just want to throw in that she there was a poll already for 2024, and she was already in fourth place. And the people who are above her, like, Cuomo, who I don't think is going to, once people see him, he's going to go down pretty quickly. He had a lot of publicity, and then the other two are like, Kamala and Buttigieg, who had a lot of publicity from running. Obviously, Kamala being VP, but I mean the fact that she's ahead of Klobuchar and all of her support, and also you mentioned about the fundraising. She's actually number one in fundraising, as far as small donors. I mean, she beats out anybody, and that's
she's
a weird
number
thing
3 in
about,
the House, though, just in terms of total haul, right?
Yeah, in total haul. I mean, but when they talk about small donors, that's of people who give less than $200 at a time. So I mean, the fact that I just think that if she were to run in 24, she would energize the left, so much. I just think it would just be tremendous.
And she has that fundraising network kind of in place.
I just don't think you can run as a congressperson for president, if that's what you're talking about, John.
I mean, I think she's
why not?
Case.
Why not?
I just think that you need to be able to convince people outside of her sphere. First off, you already have the problem that she has been better defined on the right than she has on the left. That is just a fact. More Republicans are aware of her than Democrats. And I think that's still the fact. That was certainly the case 6 months ago in terms of polling. That's a problem, right? And she needs to establish some bona fides. You've been in Congress for 2 years. Like, Obama was knocked for being in the Senate for 2 to 4 years, I guess it was. And it was like, he's been, by the time he won, he had been in the Senate for 4 years.
Right.
And the Senate, I don't know. I mean, and prior to that, he had been in the state legislature in Illinois. I just think that 2 years of being a politician, I would have no problem with her being president. But I think to make that pitch, she has to have a little bit more sort of experience, and not necessarily for her purposes, but for other people's purposes. But John, we will see. I know you will remember this phone call, and I don't know if you write it down or what, but we will see. All right. I appreciate the call.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Thank you, Sam. All right. Bye-bye.
I'm just trying to catch Emma up to speed. The typical John call, not the typical, but certainly John's calls over the years have been marked by him pointing out what I said on the specific day and episode 7, 8 months, maybe 12 months to 15 months earlier. John will often start, Sam.
Holds me accountable.
Yeah. February 8th, 2019, episode number, I don't know if he does the episode numbers, and then he would say, "You said," and he would quote me, and then he would show how I was wrong, which I really appreciate.
He's there to humble you.
Yeah.
I imagine he's got this all written down on some a series of scrolls that he sort of dusts off. And 1,000 years from now, all the evidence of our show will be gone, except someone in San Antonio will dust off a tomb, and it'll have all these notations of takes Sam had that John wants to take him up.
That were wrong.
I love the concept of a tomb, all Sam's worst takes and some sort of biblical.
Wipe off the scrolls.
Yeah.
My greatest fear, my greatest nightmare is that one day one of my children will hear a call from John and get the idea that they could do something like that as well to me, and then forget it. It's over,
But then what will John do?
Well, John will just do it based on the show. My kids will just do it based on the rest of my life. Hey, Emma, I brought this up. I know it's a sensitive thing, and I didn't want to harp on it too much, but
okay, you're gonna call me out.
But a lot of times around the office, when we're all masked up and we got all the gear on, Emma just out of the blue will just start to deride Thanksgiving. And I just thought, it's a quirk. It's weird. I don't know why she would do that. Mm-hmm. But it turns out because you're on the left.
Right.
I didn't realize that. But here is where Charlie Kirk exposes Emma for
exposes.
Yes.
You have to emphasize it like that.
Exposes, all caps. Man, Charlie Kirk, this dude is really, really taking Trump's laws hard, I think. He's really trying to figure out what he's going to do in the future.
Yeah.
This is you take out the words Thanksgiving, you take out the words Charlie Kirk. This is completely lifted from Rush Limbaugh. I've listened to Rush Limbaugh for 25 years. This whole rant is, but go ahead.
The left has always hated Thanksgiving.
Hold on, just pause.
Always.
Oh, look at that t-shirt cut. That's why I wanted it back up there because, like, he's got like a deep scoop.
Can you the first prisoner that we tortured from Iraq? He's got that look. I can't remember his name now, but there were images of him in the white t-shirt, and he's got that he's got that quality about him.
He seems less coked out than usual.
He's got seems like he's a little bit like he's had a tough time. Go ahead.
The left has always hated Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving can be interpreted as a religious holiday if you believe in giving thanks to a creator. But
Pause
they hate
for 1
Thanksgiving
second.
because
The idea that this can be interpreted as a religious holiday, I suppose you could interpret anything as a religious
I
holiday.
interpret this Wednesday as an Islamic holiday.
There you go.
That's what's weird about this is like there's two ways I think. It's a nice time to get together with family, and I don't think the left really has a problem with that. Another is this sort of imperial mythology that like completely like misrepresents colonial America, and I think the left has righteous issues with that. But then he goes on this third thing of like it's a religious thing, and I don't understand why he does that.
I mean, they're graduating from war on Christmas to war on Thanksgiving because we don't want to kill our grandmas with COVID.
It is a little bit. I mean, I guess you could say it's a religious holiday insofar as that
still hard to find a spot.
Excuse me.
Just easier to park. Still the big move. Just
is that Brendan? Is that your computer?
I suppose you could argue that, like, well, some of the people who celebrated it were religious. The
psychos. I mean, the Puritans were psychos.
Right.
I mean,
but I guess my point is that like there were Puritans there. There were also members, I think, of like the Pawtucket tribe and the Wampanoag. I know were part of that. This is all Massachusetts native indigenous people. I mean, I suppose you could say they were religious. I mean, they. In the sense that
they would be called pagan, but
yeah,
right.
I guess. I mean, like that, they gave thanks to, spirits that gave them things. I mean, I guess if you want to really be broad about it.
Is that what Charlie Kirk is talking about here?
I have no idea what Charlie Kirk is.
The left is always going after Native American spiritual.
Right. Yeah. I mean, he wants to protect the sanctity. He wants everybody to stop saging their homes. It's culturally insensitive.
Well, he needs to basically, this is such a reach that there has been an attack on Thanksgiving, from the left. I could say, well, the left has a problem with Columbus Day. And I don't know if it's just the left, but there is there's an issue with Columbus Day because it's sort of celebrating something that ultimately led to the slaughter of genocide in many respects.
I mean, it was pretty genocidal from its outset. So
yeah,
it's not the number one priority on leftist agenda, but we realign cultural representation and celebration to something that's more positive.
And I've been attacking Christmas, but not because of its. Well, I guess explicitly because of its religious nature, but not because I'm a leftist. I mean, I just attack Christmas because where people gather. I don't like the holiday.
Right.
But to pick Thanksgiving is just a weird one. It's like, but continue.
I believe there is nothing you should be thankful for in America. This is an
pause it back. Go backwards here.
The left has always hated Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving can be interpreted as a religious holiday if you believe in giving thanks to a creator. But they hate Thanksgiving because they believe there is nothing you should be thankful for in America. This is an awful place. It is cancerous, rotten to the core. Tear it all down. Burn it from within. Why would you be thankful? Instead, we need a revolution.
Yeah, it's just 800 straw mans.
Remember, as the Students for a Democratic Society radicals once wrote in the 1960s, they said, conflict is the origin of everything. What happens when you're thankful? By definition, you're less likely to be involved and engaged in conflict.
Pause it for 1 second. Is that Matt? You studied literature, didn't you? Like, is being thankful necessarily by definition contradict the idea that you would like conflict? I mean, just even if I assume that the left today is deeply immersed in the writings of the SDS from 60 years ago. 60 years ago, I guess, 50 years ago. But let's let that slide for a moment. Is it the case that like you are definitionally against conflict if you're thankful?
No, I don't think that's definitionally the case. But I also think it's true that there's a propaganda value for, projecting that time as one of just thankfulness and everybody getting along and sharing food. And I think that's what Charlie doesn't want to get into the actual historicization of this because they know they're on weak ground when you actually get to the history of this. So that's why he's doing, I think, this metaphysical stuff about thankfulness because there are plenty of history books about what actually happened. Like Squanto, for instance. Why did Squanto know how to speak English? It's because he was enslaved and brought over to Spain for a while and then miraculously got back to New England.
I think that's called a what do you call that? An exchange program.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he did some foreign exchange.
Cultural exchange program.
And like that's all miraculously missed out in the way we mythologize Thanksgiving. I think I would love to talk to Charlie about Thanksgiving and about what I actually do am thankful for in this country because I am thankful for certain things. And one of the things is to be able to freely historicize things like Thanksgiving.
Continue. Go back just a little bit. Let me catch up here. Here we go.
In the 1960s, they said conflict is the origin of everything. What happens when you're thankful? By definition, you're less likely to be involved and engaged in conflict.
So pause it. Wait a second. No, I'm still like, even like, he just seems to be putting together disparate. So if conflict is the origin of everything and thankfulness is the opposite of conflict, then the left believes that thankfulness is not the origin of everything.
What if, like, say I was thankful
that on the left you just don't think that thankfulness is the origin of everything?
I'm not thankful for everything, nor is thankfulness the beginning or end of anything, mostly.
Is he trying to say that there is a reason why he threw that religious reference in as a way of making the fact that to put into opposition the idea that you think conflict is the origin of everything, and I haven't really given that concept much thought. Yeah. I suppose to a certain extent, you could argue that even life is a function of different processes that are banging up against each other. I mean, that's the Big Bang theory, right? You don't get a bang if there isn't some type of
Well, no, that's just because God imagined the earth and it came to existence.
Well,
so
but
then there's no conflict.
I wonder if he's saying that he's trying to shove in belief in God into thankfulness. And so leftists believe that conflict is the origin of everything, which he says is in direct contradiction to the idea that thankfulness, which is actually just some type of I
think you're giving this even
second
more
order. I'm just trying to figure out what
I would just say
together.
He's just trying to say sorry, Matt, just quickly, thankfulness, Thanksgiving gives you a warm and happy feeling. Leftists are against it. That's really what it comes down to.
He's conflating gratefulness with pacification. I mean, you can be thankful that like I threw a spear and it went right in my enemy's eye, for instance, and I can like be happy about that during Thanksgiving. But I don't think that's Charlie is like everyone's getting along and empire's marching forward. I think.
Here we go. Let's listen to the rest of this. Maybe I'm reading a little too. Maybe I'm spending too much time thinking about this.
Conflict is the origin of everything. What happens when you're thankful? By definition, you're less likely to be involved and engaged in conflict. Thanksgiving is supposed to de-escalate any sort of pre-existing issues in our country. Now they're using the virus as an excuse for you not to be thankful. We'll be right back.
I get it now. I get it.
You heard the conclusion.
I get it. Now he's saying that the virus is made up to fight Thanksgiving because that's about God. Of course.
I mean, they could have just waited a few weeks and reserved this argument for Christmas because it would have fit perfectly into the war on Christmas narrative. Now just add COVID to it.
He's just practicing.
Yeah.
He's just practicing.
It's a warm-up run.
What he's doing is the equivalent of like those war games.
Right.
And he's just warming up for the war on Christmas.
He's doing like the flight simulator for the culture wars.
Charlie Kirk, ladies and gentlemen. You know what else is, since we're on this topic of the left enjoying constant conflict, here's Tucker Carlson. And here's Tucker Carlson on with Gil Barndollar. Play this clip.
Invested in it. I think the majority of U.S. veterans have gotten rid of sunk cost fallacy and realize it's well past time to come home.
So the people who actually served think that was a mistake and we should pull back. I mean, why does no one say that? Why are proponents of endless war, which is a very left-wing idea, liberal idea, certainly, why did they get the moral high ground on this and anyone who disagrees is for a weaker America?
Well, there are a couple of answers. I mean, you've seen it. You saw it in the run-up to the Iraq War. It's a lot easier, especially when it's not your sons and daughters, in a volunteer military or recruited military, if we're being honest. If it's not your sons and daughters, it's easy to shame somebody else and to invoke patriotism and to invoke strength. There's not a lot of cost and not a lot of people have skin in the game. That's a big piece of it, and that leads to we've just got broader apathy in this country towards foreign policy.
That is so true. Gil, thanks a lot.
That is so true. I'm not gonna connect. Well, keep going.
I'm going to connect.
Yeah.
I'm going to connect. The idea that Tucker Carlson, who would go on his show on CNN in the early days, prior to our invasion of Iraq, have no problem saying we should invade Iraq, but actually when he went back out into the parking lot in between takes, smoking a cigarette, doesn't care about Iraq one iota, he would say. The idea that this forever war, were Democrats complicit in it? Of course. This was initiated by the right in this country, by the Republicans. And of the millions of people who went out onto the streets to protest against Iraq, to protest against our continued occupation of Afghanistan, it's conceivable there was some people on the right there. It's conceivable. But I have to really stretch my imagination to believe that. They were not there. It was the left that was protesting these wars. It was the left that was calling for them back. It was the left that was, in part, electing Democrats in 2006 to end these conflicts. That doesn't mean that they did, but we're talking about the left here. And
here's Tucker in 2006. I got this from the Atlantic. I mean, this is after he had supported it and he was remorseful. And in one 2006 recording, Carlson says, Although I hate the war, I just have zero sympathy for them, the Iraqis, or their culture, a culture where people just don't use toilet paper or forks. When his interlocutor says it's understandable that Iraqis want Americans, quote, off their soil, Carlson responds, they can just shut the fuck up and obey is my view. And the second we leave, they're going to be calling for us to return because they can't govern themselves. That sounds kind of like a justification for forever war.
I mean, John McCain, the rational Republican, was out there saying when people were calling for a withdrawal from Iraq and Afghanistan, he was out there and saying, like, we've had troops in Germany for 50 years. I think he was saying at the time. Yeah. We've had troops in Japan for 50 years. Talk about architect of forever war. This has been the sane Republican view for decades upon decades. And the idea that somehow this is the left is in love with forever war. I mean, give me a break.
Well, that's
this
why
guy
I got
just
annoyed.
is able to say anything.
I know. Well, one, he completely and conveniently doesn't ever reckon with, in any serious way, his past on this issue. And he's instead just rebranded himself as a more edgy type of conservative so he can stand out on Fox. And I believe they call it paleo conservative, whatever the hell that means. That's what
they used to call Pat Buchanan. Oh, right. Yeah, that's the kind that I remember being at the DNC in 2004, and one of the radio guys came up to me, right winger, and they didn't know what Air America was. The idea that there could be anybody on the left on radio, they didn't believe. And he just came up to me, he goes like, so you guys Air America, right? Yeah. He goes, yeah, I'm not with those neocons. No, it's like they're all Jews. And I'm like, I see. Yeah, he's no Buchanan guy.
Yeah.
Jews.
Yeah, right.
I was like, wow, okay. Yeah. Pretty good.
I mean, and so he's attempted to, and I think honestly duped a new age of conservative Trump supporter, younger folks who want to feel like they're different substantively from other Republicans while basically supporting all of the other policies. But that is what annoyed me when we talked about that clip on CNN yesterday, when they went after Trump for announcing that he'd withdraw troops and basically saying that it was an effort to hurt Joe Biden in that area. Because then it gives idiots like Tucker Carlson this cover to say, look, we're on the side of bringing our troops home and not going to those other dirty nations, which is basically where his protectionist philosophy comes from, right?
Yep.
Like, it's very different. It comes from racism as opposed to not wanting people to die and destabilizing governments and allowing them to do what they want. But it gives that kind of talking point more life when it should be laughed at like the joke that it is, what CNN said the other day.
Let's calling from a 408 area code. Who's this? Where you calling from?
Is that me?
It is you.
Why, hello there, Sam. My name's Johnny. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Johnny. Where are you calling from?
I am in California.
Okay, Johnny from California. What's on your mind?
Well, yesterday, Matt posted this thing on Twitter that I found really interesting because I actually know something about the subject, and I thought I'd bring it up. Now, what I got is LGBT rights in socialist states. A lot of people, I've got a transgender daughter, and when she says she's a socialist online, people say stuff like, you wouldn't be allowed to live in a communist country or whatever. Well, that's pretty wrong, because 4 of the only countries in the world to never have laws against being gay are North Korea, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia. Not exactly places you'd expect to be that gay friendly, and I'm sure some of them aren't, but it's a very interesting thing to me that's the perception. But
that communist countries are anti-gay.
Yeah, I mean, some of them certainly have the history, and I don't think they're the most friendly places. But, I mean, relatively speaking, I think one of the first laws passed in the United States when it first became a country is it lowered the penalty for being gay from death to merely castration. So we've got a storied history too. I mean, I can't do that voice anymore. That's really hard on me, but I'm going to continue if you allow me here.
Sure.
Because there is some interesting stuff. Now, in the 1960s, when all that Stonewall stuff was happening, 1968, East Germany legalized being gay. 1969, West Germany. So East Germany got there first. And then in the 1980s, East Germany had LGBT stuff there too somehow. Like they had name changes, gender changes, and full-on sex changes. East Germany, 80s. When Germany united, no more of that. And the history gets even crazier because a lot of people will say stuff like, well, Che Guevara was a terrible homophobe. Cuba killed gay people. But what people don't realize is that Cuba legalized being gay in 1979. And as you definitely know, it took until 2003 until the United States did with Lawrence versus Texas.
Yes.
So just a very storied history. And me personally, I'm actually trans and queer. So very invested. Anytime I mention socialism at all, and people know it in the context of especially being trans, they're like, well, they'd kill you, and just very wrong.
I'm curious, are you familiar with any of like the Puritan era? They had laws basically against, people self-defining themselves. Like, we have to get in and decide what this person is because it's a problem for our society. Are you familiar with any of those stories?
I don't know. Tell me one, I guess.
No, I don't know off the top of my head too, but I'll maybe go on Twitter and tweet something out. There's a very interesting book that came out recently on a story like that.
I gotta say,
I'm looking at the chat. I want to do something here because the chat is like telling me to go back to the other voice, like the other voice. So I really want to do that for a second because it's like my dad's voice that I make fun of, and I like to do stuff like I had this short story written out. It'll be really quick. Let me tell this.
Okay.
I was having a friendly debate with some of my coworkers after the elections. They all love Trump. They were saying stuff like, Trump's going to fix everything. I got madder than hell, and I told them, you listen here. You suck up to them bourgeoisie pigs and class traders, y'all ain't going to get nothing. Naturally, instead of listening to or reading Vladimir Lenin's pivotal 1903 work, What Is to Be Done, which tells you what is to be done about these kinds of things, they went on some racist BS. And my adopted black transgender daughter overheard the conversation, so I had to pull her aside and tell her, honey, if Allah be with us, who can be against us, which seemed to help. And y'all, I wish I could help these men myself, but it's as the philosopher Parmenides said, 'tis necessary for thee to learn all things, both the abiding essence of pervasive truth and men's opinions in which rests no true belief. And just one more thing, I want to prove that's actually a real voice I actually do, not a deep fake, as somebody called it. So what I do is I go into this and I just transition voices like that. Wow. And on top of that, I can do somewhat of a girl voice. It's just hard to transition from this to the other, like, super redneck voice.
I feel like I'm watching Sybil.
Yeah, that's
the idea. It's crazy stuff. It's great.
Well, I mean, and I appreciate the call. I haven't seen that much of the go to a socialist country. I don't know. I mean, it's more that is one of my favorite genres of right-wing talking points, where they leverage stuff that they don't care about anyways, and attempt to say like, go be gay in Iran or something to that effect. Yeah. Where they don't care about gay people and they don't care about Iran. Like, I mean, it's like there's no investment there at all. Just they go on about their lack of nuance in any place, and just sort of, I don't know. I haven't seen it about deployed to talk about socialism in that way.
I feel like it's a little 4-6 years ago.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
That I'm sure it'll come back around. They're going to be so much stuff is going to come back around.
No, it's cyclical, and I'm thankful for it.
Team Jocks. I'm not sure what that IMer was on about regarding your comments on the military. I was in Afghanistan in 2010, 2011. I was on a small outpost for a while with a couple hundred troops. Conditions were rough, but it felt like an actual military mission. I also spent time at Bagram, which was essentially a city of 30,000 people, about 50-50 troops and contractors built by the contractors. I had my own apartment, and we had a Pizza Hut, Subway, a laundry service, a massage parlor, and other amenities. That felt like a very expensive cash grab for the contractors. Criticizing excess, waste, and hawkishness is not an indictment of the troops sent there by leadership, without a doubt.
Well, I was surprised by that comment.
Well, I think, look, in my estimation, the launch of the Iraq invasion and the occupation was illegal. Those were illegal. The attack on Afghanistan in and of itself was not illegal. I'm talking in terms of international law.
And also just the government's cooperation and working with the United States.
To the extent that there was one, yes,
to the extent
in Afghanistan. Yeah, right. And yes. And however, there were war crimes committed in Afghanistan, in addition of course, also in Iraq. The Iraq war in and of itself, I think, was a war crime. There were war crimes committed within Afghanistan, without a doubt. What Trump is talking about, incidentally, too, we're talking about removing, 2,400 troops, essentially. It is, and that's something. There's still obviously going to be NATO forces there, maybe, if this happens. I'm not sure exactly what happens in that point, but yeah, we should be drawing down our presence there. We should have done this 15 years ago. And, we were sold the Afghanistan war, it's interesting to watch. I mean, I don't want to sort of minimize this, but it was a fascinating time to watch how they, and by they, I mean society, a broad 75% of society was basically selling the war, and different parts of that society sell it in a different way. One of the ways that they sold the Afghanistan war was in part on religious freedom. The Taliban was destroying in the months up to September 11th. Taliban was destroying all sorts of was it Hindu temples? They were destroying a lot of different religious and sort of historical places in Afghanistan. And then it was also women's rights, which is true. Living, being a woman living under the Taliban, you can't. You're a girl. You can't go to school. I mean, it is horrific.
But a lot of some of the ways that was discussed were super like Western and self-important, and like
there's a certain amount of Western chauvinism that is deployed, and also in the context of feminism. But the other thing that was promised about this invasion was, we are not going to leave this country a hellhole. We're going in there and we're going to invest. And we're going to dump in billions upon billions of dollars, and we're going to create an infrastructure so that we do not leave a failed state. That was the big cri de coeur, as it were, going in there, was that, like, this is a failed state because of what happened with the Soviet occupation. The Northern Alliance we're going to empower the Northern Alliance. One of the things that bin Laden did before the attack on 9/11 was to assassinate the biggest and most important and the strongest leader of the Northern Alliance. Weeks before, assassinated him. I think they brought in a fake. They did a fake like news interview with him and blew him up. And the whole thing was, we're going to empower the Northern Alliance. We're going to create a government in Kabul and Afghanistan, and we're going to provide infrastructure. We didn't do any of that. None of it. And we're going to leave, and Afghanistan is going to be in just as bad a shape as it was. The Taliban's going to take back over, and it's all just going to be it's just going to be, hey, we just gave you 20 years of hell. But at the end of it, you're also just as bad off, if not worse, than you were at the end of it. So at the beginning of it. So there you go. Enjoy.
They hate us because they hate us.
Really just horrific.
Yeah.
And we talked about this the other day, the lack of memory.
Well, you just mentioned the Soviets and the war there.
Yep.
Back in the 80s, right?
Which we funded.
Which we funded the religious leaders.
Well, we created the madrasas that ultimately gave birth to the Taliban. That's where we essentially created Bin Laden's. We made Bin Laden into Bin Laden because he was going to fight the Russians.
I mean, and this iteration of Afghanistan wasn't like a proxy battle or just basically a battleground between the United States and Russia or whatever. But like, I don't think we've learned that much when it comes to Libya in that area. And I mean, and we're funding the genocide in Yemen, which is just a conflict between Saudi Arabia and Iran.
Yep.
So, I mean, the sociopathy with which we treat these actual nation states that contain human beings, and basically using them as some sort of bloody playground for conflict between more powerful actors, while citizens of those nations, specifically the United States, feel zero consequences of it.
Oh my God!
I mean, it's this cognitive dissonance that will never cease to enrage me.
During the Iraq War, people walk around. There was no consciousness that we were at war. None. Zero. By 2005, 2006, 2007, nothing. No awareness whatsoever. Zero. And I should also say, you brought up Libya, and I feel obligated every time to say that I was supportive of intervening at the time, not for regime change, but for the narrow confines of the UN resolution because Benghazi was under imminent threat by Gaddafi. And ultimately, I think, I learned that, and I think part of it was because I was very supportive of the UN. Ultimately, I learned that that didn't work, and that there is no way to restrain.
Thread that needle.
Yes, exactly. And it's not even like threading the needle makes it seem like there are obstacles that are hard. It's actually like that is not the agenda. There's never that agenda. To the extent that that's deployed, there's always some other agenda. And my feeling was, if you're going to, I do believe in the use of military force to stop an impending genocide or mass killing. You're talking about hundreds of thousands of people who are being threatened. And my feeling at the time was there is no way to assess if that exists on some type of like objective measure. So the only way to do it is to do it through the UN. And if the UN speaks, you've got to allow for that in that instance, because otherwise we have no mechanism in which to actually stop a genocide. That is, and it didn't work. The European nations and the United States essentially had other plans. We overstepped that mandate and we destroyed that apparatus. It's not ever going to possible to happen again for a long time, if it could. And even then, there's no guarantee that, certainly Russia and China would not go along in that situation again. All right, let's talk about what happened in Michigan, because this is this is fascinating. So there are two Trumpsters on the Wayne County Board of canvassers, I guess, basically the county board of elections, if you will. And two of them, William Hartman and Monica Palmer, decided that they were going to vote against certifying the vote coming out of Wayne County. Wayne County has houses Detroit, if you will, or Detroit sits in Wayne County.
Yes, and Trump supporters and Trump lackeys were targeting it for no specific reason.
No specific reason at all. For instance, like here's Wayne Hartman's Facebook post from 2010, found by Quentin Wilbur, or Del Quentin Wilbur. Just the classic break stuff, steal things. Here's Barack Obama, pirate, smoking a cigarette. Oh, here he is, Obama, Muslims, and NASA. I'm only interested in learning how to fly it, not land it. That, incidentally, is what the 9/11 attackers told their flight instructors down at the flight school that they were at in Florida. And here it is, Michigan, Detroit. Kwame made my license plate. That was the former mayor of Detroit. So these, those are, I don't know. I don't know what that tells you about William Hartman. He's just a guy who likes to have fun on Facebook.
Yeah. I mean, he just is really interested in D- memes that remove Barack Obama's teeth for no discernible reason. And don't forget, he used to smoke cigarettes, which means can't trust him.
He's a hood. He's a hood.
He's in the hood.
And so the Hartman and Monica Palmer decided that they thought there was something suspicious about what happened in Detroit. Now, by all other metrics, there were plenty of other places, and they said the rest of the county is all fine.
But this, just quickly, this is clearly signaling from what Trump has now said publicly, where he singled out Detroit, he singled out Philadelphia, he singled out other cities that are predominantly black. Very little to say about Pittsburgh or a city like that, which is an urban center that I guess kind of colloquially has the perception of being whiter. Nothing there. But so they're taking basically marching orders from Trump's talking points about Detroit.
And so they refused to certify. We saw the video where Kayleigh McEnany and Sean Hannity celebrated. They thought this is going to win Michigan for them. And this guy, Ned Stabler, who was on the Wayne County Board of Canvassers, gets on the Zoom call and basically says, okay, this is what is called. And when he does this, he thinks he's lost. He thinks that the ship has sailed. They refuse to certify. It goes up to the state. The state can't certify. And, who knows what's going to happen with the electors from the state and this and that. And this guy says, basically, on this Zoom call, you're going to do this. I'm going to make you pay a price. This dynamic. I want you to think about this dynamic, because this is what Democrats should have been doing. Every time they lose a battle, you exact a cost. I don't think Ned Stabler thought he was going to win this fight. I think he was just basically saying, you're going to pay for this win that you're going to get. You're going to take essentially blood money, as it were, metaphorically speaking. People are going to know it's blood money. Play this clip on the Zoom. It's really unbelievable.
We also know that the Secretary of State and the Attorney General have already tweeted out that your legal arguments are rubbish and you're going to lose when it comes to court. So we're not worried about that at all. I'm also not worried about any of your, things are bad so we can't certify arguments, because that's just ridiculous. You certified in August when they were worse. Less than 50% of the ballots are recountable. Now over 72% are. 58% of them are even balanced when it was less than 30% last time. So it's doubled. It's gotten way better because the Secretary of State actually jumped in and did her job, unlike you. But I know it's not going to change your opinion. You talked about not certifying Detroit, even though you acknowledged that Livonia, a city, by the way, I know you know is 95% white, had bigger variances than Detroit, which is 80% black. We understand, and you've now added your name. So I'm not going to try to change your mind. I just want to let you know that the Trump stink, the stain of racism that you, William Hartman, and Monica Palmer have just covered yourself in, is going to follow you throughout history. Your grandchildren are going to think of you like Bull Connor or George Wallace. Monica Palmer and William Hartman will forever be known in southeastern Michigan as two racists who did something so unprecedented that they disenfranchised hundreds of thousands of black voters in the city of Detroit because they were ordered to. Probably, I know, Monica, you think Q told you to do it or some other crazy stuff like that. But just know, when you try to sleep tonight, that millions of people around the world now on Twitter know the name Monica Palmer and William Hartman as two people completely racist and without an understanding of what integrity means or a shred of human decency. The law isn't on your side. History won't be on your side. Your conscience will not be on your side. And Lord knows, when you go to meet your maker, your soul is going to be very, very warm.
Thank you.
And the end of the story is that they basically came to some resolution where they're going to perform some performative audit of the votes, and they've certified the election, essentially. And
I love that he pointed out historical context, because it's amazing to me how we learn about these things in history class, and like there are villains and there are people on the right side, but nobody in current times thinks about themselves in those contexts, or like understands their place in history and how things will be looked back upon. I mean, I think that's important to impress upon people, even though it may not change anything. It's just this, people it doesn't register with them.
You know, as I'm watching that, I'm thinking, who is it going to be? Certainly I can name the people on the right, and I'm curious as the people who are sort of like on the nominal left, who are going to say, like, this is cancel culture. This is cancel culture run amok. This is the weaponizing of the idea, like right? I mean,
Michael Tracy,
right,
says white supremacist violence isn't a real problem, or whatever.
This is, I mean, you know, like that's what's going to be like. This is bullying.
Yeah.
In fact, I don't want to say the innovators of that model, but the most prestigious people who deployed that was Antonin Scalia on the Supreme Court when they gutted the Voting Rights Act. And they said that the reason why it was authorized, this is in 2013, the reason why it was reauthorized by the Senate.
Interpreting things, by the way, which is what you're not supposed to do.
In 2007, the Senate, I think it was 98-0 or something to that effect, reauthorized the Voting Rights Act. And in addition to like John Roberts and Scalito, both of them, saying that, you know, racism is basically over, Scalia justified the reauthorization by saying they were afraid. They were afraid of being called racists, and that's why they did it. That's why they reauthorized it, because they were just too afraid of something like what we just saw happening. And there's definitely going to be a take that, like, they've deployed the attack, the worst thing you could say about somebody, that they're racist, on them to get them to take black people's votes seriously.
Which, by the way, is potentially holding your representatives accountable for not being racist.
Exactly.
That's part of it. That's part of like the whole purpose of having elected officials. I mean, I don't know if you want to play this, but I really like the Detroit NAACP heads yelling at them, the Michigan county officials as well.
Yeah.
Because that was cathartic too.
Let's play this clip. This is also part of the response of the attempt by the Wayne County Board of Canvassers to decertify the vote and discount the vote of hundreds of thousands of black folk in Detroit.
You look at black cities, you have extracted a black city out of a county and said the only ones that are at fault, at an issue, is the city of Detroit, where 80% of the people who reside here are African Americans. Shame on you. Shame on you for leading to this level of corruption. You have disavowed your right to even sit in the seat that you occupy. You are a disgrace as relates to the ability to have a free and impartial election in this nation. You have...
Hard to argue.
Yeah.
Hard to argue.
I just, the level of catharsis there reminded me of, I believe it was the Los Angeles hearings on policing, where people just ripped into them like earlier this year. Do you remember that?
I don't think I saw that.
I mean, I forget this one, like, caller basically said, suck my dick and choke on it.
Jeez. Touche.
Anyway.
It would have been better if we had the video of the people that they were actually, chastising. But unfortunately, Zoom is behind again.
Bad. You want to see the faces. Calling from a 207 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Sam. This is Magnus from your IMs. How are you?
Magnus from the IMs. What's happening?
Hey, I was just up here in Maine, and Paul's rant yesterday made me think about our awful centrist Democrat candidate who ran against Susan Collins.
Yeah, Gideon.
Her big campaign ad was how she stopped people from sitting on either side in the main House of Representatives and had them all sitting together so they could get things done. That was her claim to fame.
Oh, that's so sweet. How did that work out?
Yeah. It worked out. She got about 42% of the vote against a very flawed Susan Collins.
Which was supposed to be a shoo-in victory.
Wasn't there an ad that this guy Bill somebody cut, like a sportscaster or old time sports guy?
Yes.
What tell us about
Bill
that?
Green.
Bill Green. My understanding is that had a huge impact in Maine. Is that your sense too?
I believe it. Bill Green is a beloved figure from our local news and local programming on the television.
And he came out with an ad in support of Collins, right? Like in the last 2 or 3 weeks.
Right at the last minute, the last couple of days, even.
This is the problem with running on nothing. Like it works if you have someone who is a horror show like Donald Trump, and that can't be dislodged. And it almost was. I mean, I don't think this race was ultimately that close, but it's not impossible to stand back and say, like, well, if Trump had been able to do that, but Trump mobilized a lot of like horrid people. Sorry, and to get them to vote for him. The people who had just sort of come out of said like, oh, I like this, whatever it is. And, but if Trump wasn't so uniquely just distasteful to Americans, right? Not even on necessarily ideological grounds, but just sort of like, God, man, he's just ruining my life. I mean, a lot of people were just like, I don't like.
Yeah.
Susan Collins is not like that. Susan Collins, to the extent that she had liabilities, was like ideological, and it was like she's with that guy. And when the problem is, if you're not running on anything and you're just making it a referendum, you are susceptible to someone coming in and saying, I know you think she's with that horrible person, but it's me, your sweet old uncle. And that's what that sportscaster guy was like, right? I mean, he was like a mainstay, I guess,
for decades and decades.
And he came in and vouched for her, and that's all it took at that point. It's like, no, your interpretation of who Susan Collins is wrong, and you can trust me more than Gideon. And because Gideon's offering nothing else, there's no sort of like inoculation against something like that.
And I also could say
it works so well.
Sorry, just
ad
quickly.
Works so well.
Oh, go on.
The ad works so well because people here in Maine, they love the old uncle that you can trust. That's just how we are in Maine. You wear a flannel shirt and you almost automatically get gravitas.
Yep.
And if they just ran, and Sarah Gideon's a multimillionaire herself. I mean, you could have run someone in a flannel shirt, and I think you could have beat Susan Collins this time.
Yep.
Well, there is going to be, I mean, and I'm putting this delicately, progressive packaging in certain states the future is going to have to be people who like demographically connect with folks. Like I think about John Fetterman in Pennsylvania as someone who could potentially run for Senate successfully as like the burly 6'7", tatted up progressive, and that could actually work in Pennsylvania.
That sounds great.
That's that whole concept that I talk about that they give you in media training, which is get inside the circle of trust.
Mm-hmm.
Guy shows up like Fetterman, and he's got and he's got his what are those? What do we call those? The Carhartts, but what are also the boots?
Tim's, Timberlands,
not the Timbies. We used to. What the hell were those called?
The hiking boots.
The ones like the tan boots. I don't think people wear those as much anymore. But you show up with that, and it's just like, oh, this dude, he's got tats, and he's like, this guy's like me.
Yeah.
Or
I
he's
would
like
love
my,
if
he's like my,
Fetterman-
yeah. I mean, and so things become easier, and that's basically what happened with up in Maine. I mean, it was, you know,
And they thought
they could localize.
They could throw an LL Bean vest. They
Yep.
thought they could just put a brand new LL Bean vest on Sarah Gideon, and people would
Oof.
think she was from around here. But it was totally obvious that she didn't belong here.
Appreciate the phone call. Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's in that show pilot season I did, the manager I played, when he went to go visit this actor he was trying to convince, who was a farmer in Nebraska, to come sign with him. He pulled up to the place and he got into his trunk and he pulled out this sort of leather bomber jacket and said, you know, when in Rome, do like the Romans do.
I like the flourish.
Yes, it was totally. He's like, got on Sky Mall, and that's what Gideon had, that quality of like, oh, look at that LL Bean thing that you got that is supposed to like, not Doc Martens, not Timbies.
Nobody wants to feel like.
What the hell is the name of those boots?
Especially in smaller states, like, and New England's weird in that way. Like they want the politicians to be even more authentic than like almost areas like Connecticut or New Jersey or New
super
York.
parochial.
Right.
Up in Massachusetts, got parts of the super parochial. Rhode Island, New Hampshire, a little bit less, but Vermont, et cetera, et cetera. Disco Stew. The Fetterman analysis is a tacit admission that race, gender are bigger factors than ideology, which I would tend to agree with.
It depends on the market.
I don't think it's. I think Emma's right. I think it depends on the market. I also don't think it's necessarily a bigger factor than ideology, but I think it's as big. Let's put it that way. Not Blundstone boots, not Red Wing boots. No. They're like the tan boots that had like, God, not Danner boots. No, forget it. Maybe it's Timbies, but I don't think so.
I think it is.
People would never tie them up.
Bean boot? Well,
oh God, I can't.
That's LL Bean.
Hey, speaking of uniquely American, this is pretty impressive, and I've seen some like response on Twitter to this. It's just sort of shocking. This is CBS News KTVT footage from Dallas, Texas. We are right now in, I think it's December 28th, something like that date. There will be 12 million. Right now, there's about 21 million Americans on unemployment insurance. In the last week of December, December 26th, there is what is known as a benefit cliff. 7.3 million workers on pandemic unemployment assistance, which is a supplemental insurance, unemployment insurance for people who are like not on payroll, right? Like you're a gig worker, you're a self-employed worker. You haven't necessarily, there haven't been payments, unemployment insurance payments that have been put in, so you're not usually covered. That's going to run out for 7.3 million people. In addition, there's another almost a little more than 4.5 million people on pandemic emergency unemployment compensation. That's the unemployment insurance extension available for people who've gone past the number of weeks that you are normally kept on unemployment insurance, which is like 24 weeks or something. And that depends on the state. But there's another 4.5 million who are going off it then. So you're talking about 12 million people who are going to lose unemployment insurance the day after Christmas. We're and you already we're in Q4 now, cities and states facing massive cutbacks. The MTA is looking to lay off like 10,000 people in New York City alone. And that has a ripple effect on down. And when you get people off unemployment insurance, that has a ripple effect on down too, because every dollar you spend on unemployment insurance, not only does it is there a moral imperative to it because people need to eat. We also have a bunch of eviction moratoriums that are ending
at the end of the year.
At the end of the year, so 5 days after their unemployment insurance runs out, there's a moral imperative so that people can eat, so that people can have a place to live, et cetera, et cetera. But from an economic standpoint, for every dollar you spend on unemployment insurance, it generates 1.6, basically $1.60 in economic activity. Because I get my employment check, I go down to the store, I buy a bag of bread. The guy who's working at the clerk, he gets paid because I'm buying stuff there.
Right.
And then that guy goes out and he goes to, he doesn't go to a movie now, but he buys.
It's the simple explanation for why trickle-down economics is such a farce, because the people who are wealthiest are more likely to hoard their money, invest it in the stock market. People who are needing assistance immediately are going to put it right back into the economy for food,
as that multimillionaire Nick Hanauer, who's been going around trying to sort of espouse this stuff, says a rich person only buys one loaf of bread at a time.
Yeah.
And the bottom line is, if you give money to people who are cash strapped, they immediately put it into the economy. They don't save it in their bank or invest it in the stock market or, trying to, overseas real estate investment with a 10-year horizon, whatever it is. And so we are facing this incredible unemployment cliff, and there is absolutely no action happening in D.C. to provide any relief for people who are who are just staring into the abyss. And there's no action in Washington. Now, a functioning society would look at images like what's happening in Dallas, Texas, and respond with hey, we've got a big problem. You see that? It looks like traffic. It looks like, there must be an accident on that highway. It's not. It is literally a line that the helicopter taking the picture cannot capture of food assistance.
And this is what we were seeing very similarly at the start of the pandemic in early April and before they got the CARES Act.
Before you got your $1,200 stimulus check, before you got your increased in unemployment benefits for $600 extra a month, and that really helped people dramatically.
Right. And now we are entering into a period of the pandemic when it's not getting warmer. It's going to be a dark winter, as Joe Biden put it. And deaths are about to increase significantly from COVID-19. By some estimates, I heard this morning on the news that I think there were 172,000 cases of coronavirus yesterday. And then on top of that, we're entering into a lame duck session, which means the earliest relief will be in February, if there's anything at all, because McConnell is likely to still be the majority leader of the Senate.
Yep.
And then he's going to try to implement austerity. And that is permanent, detrimental effects to the economy. And then also just kicking millions and millions of Americans in the teeth. I mean, the amount of harm, anxiety, pain is immeasurable right now.
And look, I spent a lot of time criticizing Nancy Pelosi for not taking that $1.8 trillion deal.
Same, and I feel like there wasn't anybody really talking about it that much. At the time.
This situation was so predictable, and it was morally, it is the Democrats, and by the Democrat, I mean just Nancy Pelosi. She had control over this process. They were wrong and you see this just sort of banking on them winning in a way that yes, all the signs said that, but there was no reason not, if you thought you were going to win that big, to expend some of that political capital to ensure that people would not be destroyed in the way that they're being destroyed.
And on the other side of the coin, this now emboldens Republicans to do nothing, right?
Why in the world?
They were the ones in the politically precarious situation as they perceived it as well.
Yep.
When this negotiation was happening with Mnuchin, and now Trump and Mnuchin have zero incentive to do anything except loot on their way out.
Without a doubt. And Mitch McConnell, he expended political capital.
Yeah.
He had to risk the idea of not passing anything in the Senate. That's the thing, is that people just perceive it as it was risky for the Democrats. It was risky for Mitch McConnell to do that too. And if anybody thinks that Mitch McConnell is going to pass shit in the new year, the first thing I would do if someone says that, they may pass something, but it's really going to be it's going to be a massive giveaway to corporations, and there's going to be a bone thrown, a tiny, tiny, tiny bone thrown to people, unless the Democrats win in Georgia. And I don't know, I don't know. Maybe I'm just sequestered. Maybe I'm just not exposed to political stuff that much. But I don't know why the pounding in my head is not people are going to starve if the Democrats don't take Georgia. I don't know why that's not happening. Now, I can understand you may not want to nationalize the race because the Democrats' brand has been so, it's crappy in Georgia. It's not great other places.
But that exact thing is the playing from weakness, the playing not to lose that we can't stand.
Exactly. And this is,
they literally,
if anybody thinks that Mitch McConnell's going to pass shit in 2021 or 2022, the first thing I would do to that person is just go over and actually see if they're not, if it's actually them speaking, because it's impossible to imagine that they have any type of brain function,
or if they're fully or just partially lobotomized.
Exactly. That's it's exactly the first thing that I think about is if someone could say that is Charlton Heston in the Planet of the Apes, when the guy runs up to him and he sees the big cut right here. And it's just because you would have to have been asleep for a decade to assume that they're going to do anything.
You can't play prevent defense when there are millions and millions of Americans who are about to be thrown onto the streets.
But that ship has sailed now.
And starving. No, I get it. But why do you think that you're losing
a
good portion of the working class in this country when you decide to come from a place of weakness when it comes to material well-being?
Yeah, I don't even think it's necessarily I don't even say why you're losing working classes. It's you're not exhibiting any power to anybody,
right?
And in addition to specifically hurting people, I'm not quite sure. You look at this data, places where unemployment went up, that Trump had won the first time, he won by a bigger margin where unemployment went up.
Because he projected strength.
Exactly.
His version of strength.
Exactly.
So much of this, over half the battle, honestly, is just making your own goddamn case.
This just in, and I got to say, I called this too.
Yeah.
I told my kids, I said, if you go back to school by Thanksgiving, you're out. New York City closing schools tomorrow.
Wow.
It's just, and it was because actually of MarkAlain Dery. He said 6 months. That's just the way it works with pandemics, month to month. And I told my kids in April, I said, if we go back to school, you're out. We're out by Thanksgiving. I don't know. It sucks.
I'm sorry. Sorry for your kids.
Well, my kids actually, my daughter had already been fully remote because she went to a school of 4,500 kids, and
no way.
And she was like, I'm not going in there, dude. And then it turned out going to school at the high school, the kids were going, but the teachers were Zoomed in.
Mm-hmm.
So the teachers weren't there anyway.
Seems like
and in high school in New York City, my daughter's got friends who go to 5 or 6 different schools. She's got some of her friends go to her school, but her friends are all over the place.
Yeah.
I get, she texts me and I'm like, where are you? She goes, oh, I'm down in the East Village. We're hanging out with, Dora. What? Who's that? Oh, she's a friend of mine. Where does she go to school? I'm not sure. What? What are you talking about? It's like, I don't know. It's the city kids are different. And my son has been basically just doing all remote too. He's been basically, we had him in a small pod because I was like, 2 days a week and we're going to go. Yeah.
Yeah.
He was turning into it was like, he was getting a little feral.
Right.
In the spring. He was getting a little feral.
I feel like I'm getting feral.
I know it. This is going to be rough. We got 3 or 4 months. Patrick, the Puritans were psycho. Boom. H-Dub, who is this guy? He sounds cool. Lindsey Graham Lindsey Graham cracker. Make this guy an everyday caller, please. Love the voice. Damn. Shelby from Phoenix. Thanksgiving is literally my favorite holiday. Charlie Kirk is a moron. Who doesn't love eating too much and napping?
I love Thanksgiving.
Team Jocks. I'm not sure what IMer was on about regarding your comments on the military was in Afghanistan. We read that one, didn't I? Yeah, I did read that one. Eddie from Ohio. Sam, next time you have Paul Rykoff on, ask him what he thinks about unions. Every jackass like him I've ever met him is against them, especially business owners. Don't care about working class people, which is why they think everyone thinks the way they do. They never speak or consider. I tend to think that Paul's probably not coming back on. I would think so. I'd be welcome to have him on, but
did we have we discussed our favorite Thanksgiving food yet?
No, are we going to do that?
No, I just thought of it on the spot just because I wanted to talk about how mashed potatoes are the best.
That's it?
With gravy. Yeah.
That's nice.
I agree. I could just do the mashed potatoes.
I mean, it's arguably my favorite food. If you just put a lot of butter in it and you put gravy on top, it's like perfect.
It's like a Thanksgiving food. You never had mashed potatoes?
No, I have, but
it's different on Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
For me now, when I get together with my family, it's like, it's really just, I drink. I don't.
Well, yeah. I mean, the wine is always fun.
Mashed potatoes are good. My dad makes 2 types of stuffing.
Okay.
One's just like a regular chestnut stuffing, and the other one's a seafood stuffing. That's probably my favorite thing.
Okay. Gotcha.
Another Thanksgiving-related thing is sports, and Charlie doesn't like sports now because it's too political. But that's one of my favorite things about Thanksgiving is football, and Christmas you got basketball.
Oh yeah, and now that the NBA is coming back on the 22nd, we're gonna have Christmas basketball still. Although I don't know if the Knicks play this year. They got booted from Christmas. They used to always play every Christmas. The Knicks.
Is that
right? But they're too bad. And so for the first year in a really long time last year, they were not on the slate. They're not on the docket.
The Pats have been playing a lot on Thanksgiving, but I don't know if they're going to do that this year. I think they may have lost that slot.
It's Ravens, Steelers, it's Lions always play, and the Cowboys always play, I think, right? I don't know.
It's going to get really bad when I get really exposed not knowing nearly as much about sports as it's not necessarily.
Look, I mean, it's not the best use of my time, but it's an addiction.
Winnipeg. Oh, yeah. Okay. Here we go. So glad you got Dr. Dery back on. Says science people don't care about your fee-fees. Amazing how much we've learned from that discussion. Covered so many points I've discussed with friends, family members recently, the vaccine development. One point that'll be interesting to watch out for is how this will affect FDA guidelines for vaccine drug development going forward, i.e. data collection from simultaneously phased studies. There's going to be so much that comes out of this that I think, we're going to be able to look back on 5-10 years from now and say this was a good period for the development of this type of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
There's also that FDA, that home test that's coming out. It's going to be $50. I think probably or close to $35, $40, $50. But it's basically like a breathalyzer at home.
Is it reusable?
No, one off. But my guess is within a month, we're going to have another one that's going to be 15, and then it's going to be down to 5. ICE team. Oh, we should also say the Moderna vaccine, $1.5 billion worth of U.S. of tax dollars. I mean, let's be clear on this.
Warp Speed.
Yeah.
But I mean, and the Pfizer one was Germany. So I made this point, and I remember, Anna called me very naive. But the idea that Operation Warp Speed was just done so haphazardly, like $1 billion here, $1 billion to this company. Like there was no incentive for sharing information, I feel like, provided. Like in an ideal world, you would make some of that money conditional upon working together. And then there were articles that came out in Reuters, I believe, that some of the executives got stock buybacks already and were utilizing their inflated stock value based on the news and press releases, which just a huge waste. And another example of the Trump administration not being thoughtful about this.
I mean,
not that I think most like neoliberal democratic administrations would do much differently.
Right. And I'm not worried about the waste in this context, right? Like there is no, like, you know, you get the thing done, you know, to be able to say like, we saved a couple $1 billion, but you could have easily used the Defense Production Act, and you could have easily put restrictions on there that like, look, hey, we're going to pay for this, and we're going to give you, let's say, 15% returns. How's that?
Right.
But this is going to be public, open sourced information, or, you know, or you've got to share it amongst, you know, got to have it at the NIH. I mean, I don't know exactly what strings are attached there, but we saw a model, at least in practice, like where Cuomo took over the hospitals in the state and essentially did the state version of nationalizing them, so that you could distribute resources in the most efficient way possible. And in the context of this research, undoubtedly sharing data back and forth. But I'm not convinced that wasn't already built. Like that stuff that was on the shelf, I bet you if you go back and you find that, I bet you that stuff was financed by the government as well.
Yeah.
And a lot of that stuff on the shelf may have been proprietary, but I bet you there's a significant amount that was not.
Right.
Wasn't the movie Rambo dedicated to the Mujahideen? I don't think so.
I'm going to Google that.
But it's not impossible. Leon Thotsky, shout outs to Johnny from California with a fantastic call. Bud Ward, hey Sam, the fatty snack food you were slightly recalling yesterday were mostly promoted as good fat in a late 90s Lay's product called Wow Chips. They went through a lot of people. Yes, indeed. MT Cuck, I first heard of Dianne Feinstein when Jello Biafra, the dead Kennedys, ran for mayor of San Francisco in 79. Can't believe she's still helping to ruin people's lives in 2020.
And Rambo 3 was.
Rambo 3 was? Wow.
Said, someone claimed that the dedication at the end of the film had been altered at various points in response to the September 11th attack. Specifically, it is claimed that the dedication was at one point to the brave Mujahideen fighters and then later changed to the gallant people of Afghanistan. Reviews of the film upon its release and later publications show the film was always dedicated. Oh, sorry, I should have read ahead. Always dedicated to the gallant people of Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Disappointing.
Science people don't care about your fees. Sadly, all the people who make those decisions aren't working from the office. Oh, and the Moderna said they'd charge $25 a shot, and there were protests that day down the street in Cambridge over it. So my old stomping grounds, Cambridge. Libertine Queen. In these days of cell phones, I am down to only 3 memorized phone numbers. Mom's cell, dad's cell, and 646-257-3920.
I think I only know my mom's cell by heart.
I don't know.
Principal casualty among the historical relics destroyed by the Taliban were the Buddhas of Bamiyan, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, 2,500 years old, 150-foot tall monuments depicting multiple figures, a tragic loss. Beat the Reaper. What a great takedown, Sam. Turn that one into a fill-in-the-blank template. Needs to be a clip. I'm not 100% sure what you're talking about, but...
Accept a compliment.
I will take it. Sean from NorCal. China granted Ivanka Trump a trademark for voting machines. The whole discrediting Dominion thing is a prelude to making an argument for switching to Ivanka's machines, which you all know beforehand won't favor Trump in 2024. Massive sarcasm. Huh. Oh, geez. All right. We got time for one more phone call. Calling from a 352 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, this is from Gainesville, Florida. How you doing?
Who is it from Gainesville?
Ken, like the Barbie doll.
Okay.
Hey,
Ken, like the Barbie doll from Gainesville, Florida. What's on your mind, Ken?
Hi. So I wanted to talk about all the states legalizing different drugs or like cannabis and magic mushrooms, and just my personal experience with it being legalized for medical here in Florida. So I went to college for horticulture at University of Florida, and I was always like a big pothead guy, and my intention was to, work in the cannabis industry. I was originally probably going to move to like Colorado, but in 2016 they legalized it in Florida, and my hometown, we got a couple pot farms, and I go to work for one of these places, and it's just like, it's a nightmare, like the business practices are terrible. They pay people horrible wages. They engaged in some like really bad union busting where there were people trying to get a union started, and they would get fired and then try to go work at one of the other cannabis places, and they would get blackballed and they wouldn't be able to get a job at another place. And so basically what I was just going to say is, or ask you guys, is what you think the new states who are legalizing for the first time can do to basically prevent these horrible labor practices by these new cannabis industries. Because all these new states, I'd say probably especially in the South, that are legalizing medical marijuana, they're going to have some system in place where you have to pay like hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to get a license to legally grow it.
Yep.
And that's what happened here. And like ideally, if it was really legal, you could just grow it in your backyard or get a farm and get a nursery license and grow it legally and profit from it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm convinced that's why it hasn't been legalized in New York. That's why Andrew Cuomo, I think, is just like waiting to figure out a way on how he can make it, how he can get his friends to essentially make cash off it. And the way that you do that is, you take something that is like, the functional equivalent of me growing tomatoes in my backyard and say that, oh, you need a license to grow that tomato.
Yeah. I mean, I was kind of surprised too that it came up for, I should have followed it a little more closely, a ballot initiative in New Jersey, because like the pharmaceutical presence in New Jersey is so intense. But I mean, maybe they've found a way.
They'll figure out a way. They're going to have the inside track on getting the licenses, of course. Exactly. I mean, this is a problem. I mean, it's also indicative of like the idea that like we got to shrink government to get rid of corruption. Because if we just went by the states, there wouldn't be any corruption. No, the states are easier to corrupt because, a dollar in terms of like corrupting a state official, it goes a lot further than a buck in corrupting a federal official.
Yeah, of course.
And so, it's definitely a problem. I mean, it's definitely a problem. I think the only thing I can tell you is that there will be an evolution, right? Because this is not like the bar to entry is not like it is if you were, I don't know, had a still. Because the fact is that like, I mean, people can make their own beer and it's a bit of a pain in the ass, but it's much easier to like
just buy it.
It's going to be, but it's also going to be ubiquitous to start to grow it. And then eventually it's going to be at the farmer's market. I mean, it's going to take years, but that's what's going to happen. And so I think you're only going to get good labor practices in this industry in the same way that you would get good labor practices in any industry. It depends on your state. And it also depends upon what's happening on a federal level. But I appreciate the phone call. It's an interesting point. Eventually
that is a pronounced, I think, problem in legalization right now, is just legalization for corporate monopolies and not legalizing growing and stuff like that.
Of course.
Right.
All right, that's it for our calls today, folks. Sorry about that. And we'll do a couple more IMs and then we'll get out of here. Brooks, no, not Doc Martens. The Fetterman analysis, yeah, we already did that. Brooklyn Math, Bean Boots, no. No, not Red Wing. Come on, guys.
Maybe
Mariah PDX, not
imagined
Blundstone. I'm wearing some Blundstones these days, but not Red Wing Brooks. Nice try, Jay Shivani. Psych Oops, not Red Wing Boops. Psych Ups. No, it was before Red Wings. Benny Buttons. Fetterman did go all vigilante and chase down a minority man with a shotgun in Braddock when he was mayor. Look up the story if you haven't heard it. Also showed 2 appointments with criminal justice reform advocates, again when mayor. Also no-showed. Agree about the aesthetic, but some people seem to think the guy is flawless where I live. Well, no politician's flawless.
Wait, who's flawless? I'm sorry?
Fetterman.
Yeah. No, but I mean, he'd be a progressive senator, which is
right.
Very hard to secure. We've got like 4.
Not lugs boots. Thank you. Anyways, kakalaka. Well, yeah, we would call them shit kickers, but they're not. That's not Red Wings. Oh my God, Militant, not Chuka boots, not Red Wings. Thank you. Not Fubu's. Oh my gosh, Sam CBD, not Carhartt boots, not Tim's. I don't think it was Timmy's. Not Georgia boots. What the hell were the name of those boots?
When did you wear these boots, or when were these boots? 80s. Work.
Maybe they were Timbies, not Uggs.
Not Wellingtons. Wellies.
Not Wellingtons, not Lugs. Gosh, I got to look it up. Okay, really cool. Let's see. No, it's Craig in Portland, not Romeo. Oh, God, I can't get. I'm going to skip down here. So the final IM of the day. MR just needs to come out with their own tan boots. Call them Sammys. Market them to libertarians and put the phone number on the sole. All right, folks, see you.
Dunham?
No, tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie.